Well, hello and welcome to episode number 314 of the Plane Talking UK podcast. I'm Carlos, and in this week's news and guest pack show, Stansted Airport paid tribute to the NHS, everyone's favourite airline reject the moving of middle seats, and did we all miss the memo this week? Is it really National Ding Your Widebody Aircraft Day today? And in the military grey stuff, and there's loads of news to come in that from Armando this week. So joining me over in the PTUK studios this week, and he's not stressed out one bit. It is, of course, the non-stressed out Matt Smith.
I noticed you chickened out there, by the way. Sorry, what I actually wrote it there because sorry, I should just explain, ladies and gentlemen. I forgot to write the intro before we started, and in the bottom there is what he should have said is in the military, grey stuff shoots at other grey stuff, but he chickened out because he thought he might upset Armando. So there we are. Yes, yes, yeah. We've been having a few gremlins in the works today. I think it's safe to say. Yes, over to you, Carlos. You're there. You're in the studio. Things are plugged in. Lights are on. I think we're online. I'm not sure. Yeah. Absolutely. I'll go and press some more buttons while you introduce everyone else.
You carry on. So, joining us this week, as always, from his sprawling, stately mansion in the Buckinghamshire countryside, it is, of course, the green-fingered gardener, Neville Bounds.
Yes, hello everybody. Yes, so there's lots of gardening and DIY and home activity going on this week, and there will be as well later on, unfortunately, because my company's going through one of those furlough programs, so I shall have some time off in about 3 weeks' time. So we'll see how we go with that. But yeah, lots of aviation stuff been going on this week, considering that very little is flying. So it's interesting, and we will see how the media manage that a bit later on as well.
And also joining us this week on the show, as always, it is the guy who puts the M into military, and he's obviously the legend that is, the pilot that is, it's obviously Armando.
Hey guys, glad to be back in person for yet another week. I feel like I can only do this 3 times a month now, but yeah, it's a beautiful day here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I did get to go up flying. I know we had a good conversation about this last week about is general aviation essential or not, but we actually had to fly the airplane because airplanes don't like to sit. So I got to take the skydive plane up for an hour and a half and take it up to altitude, exercise it, and then bring it back down. And I will say I was not the only one in the skies. There was a lot of GA up, but that's a good conversation topic.
You're lucky. We've got hardly any in the UK, so you're lucky in that respect. All we've got is freight dogs flying through the skies over here, Armando.
Yeah, I think all of the out-of-work airline pilots are currently taking their small aircraft up in the air and just chasing each other around the skies.
Actually, what's interesting, sorry to sort of interrupt there, I noticed that because Captain Rick Bell's in the chat room at the moment, he's just saying it'd be nice to be outside, but it's actually snowing where he is. I know. Mind you,
That's great because tomorrow I have to go up to Pennsylvania where Captain Rick is. Major Rick, not Captain Rick.
Steady.
Geez, I just demoted him. That's great. It's beautiful and sunny here in Charlotte, and tomorrow I'm going to have to pack a knit cap, gloves, and a scarf and
skis.
Good times.
Yeah. So we have got 2 very special guests on the show this week, and we're going to welcome our first guest on. He is he's part of one of the greatest Haynes manual podcasts in the world, all regarding the Airbus A320. Is of course Andy Wilson from the A320 podcast.
Hello, that's very kind words, Carlos. Very kind words. You don't have to say that. You know, your check has been posted several times, and it will not bounce this time, I promise.
Yeah, nobody believes you. It's fine.
It's okay. I've got the Dettol here. We'll be all right.
Yeah, thanks for having us on the show again. It's been nearly 3 years since we were last
too long. Far too long, absolutely.
Yeah, it was back in 2017.
So how are things with you, Andy? I'm guessing obviously things are quiet with you in regards to your flying
Yes, last flight I did was the 23rd of March, and since then I've been stay-at-home dad, just enjoying life with my little girl and my wife here at home because she's working at home, and it is lovely.
I bet. I genuinely, it must be like the most time that you spent with your family, and that's just the nature of the job, isn't it? I mean, everybody knew that what they were letting themselves in for when they signed up. I know, but if you can take a positive out of this horrendous situation, really, it must be so nice to, as you say, have a bit of quality time at home.
Oh, it's fantastic. Me and my little daughter Zoe have just played for the past 3.5 weeks. It's just been great.
Oh, lovely.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear. Good home education. That's the best way. So joining us, our second guest on the show this week. We've had guests on in the past. We've had pilots, we've had cabin crew, and we thought we'd push the boat out this week and we'd go for someone who keeps the aircraft in the sky by checking the engines. So we're going to welcome on to the show for his first appearance on the show, Peter Collings.
Hello, ladies and gents. Nice to meet you all. This is something of a first for me. Very generous introduction from you there, Carlos, but it's all sounding very good and very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, the first positive introduction is free, and all other ones after that, as Andy knows, are very expensive. But
awesome.
So just a quick brief one for the listeners, Peter. What is it? Just briefly, what you do?
So, in essence, what I do is I inspect aircraft engines. I look specifically at the aircraft engine blades and the hot section, and just basically check that everything is serviceable and good to go. And as well as that, I do a little bit of training for engineers on the engine ground runs they need to do in the simulators around the world, and also train engineers how to boroscope. And if anyone's wondering, boroscope is like a little camera on a tube that goes inside the engine. In a nutshell, that's it.
Now, right, okay. Get your thinking caps on then, chat room, because I dare say you'll have loads of questions that you want to ask in here, and I dare say you've probably had to inspect several of the engines that have been ruined by Andy in his career.
Too many toga takeoffs, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
And the rivalry between the engineers and the pilots shall continue.
Yes, there we go. It's going to be a spicy old show, isn't it?
It's okay, Armando. We outnumber the engineers.
Oh, blimey! And before this descends into an all-out fight war, we're going to welcome everyone in who has joined us in the chat room this evening. Loads and loads of names. Going to quickly whiz through. Tony S, Alan from Helston, Masha. We've got Laura Davis. Hello, Auntie Liz in the chat room. Rick Bell is also in the chat room as well. Richard Adams, Nick Codling. We've got Pilot Pip in there. Alan White. Hello to you, Alan. We're going global this evening, guys and girls. Got everyone from across the globe here. Chris Griggs, hello to you, Chris. Richard Adams, if I miss anyone out, hopefully. Aaron P, hello to you as well. And welcome to everyone who has joined us on this 17th of April.
Yeah, we've got Matt's Aviation channel, Alan from Helston, Laura Davis. Auntie Liz, obviously, I think you mentioned, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, yeah. So welcome, everyone, to the show, and thanks for joining us on this Friday evening. So I suppose we better move things on as we do each week with our rundown of the weekly news from around the world and the UK. So if everyone's ready...
Hopefully.
Yes.
Let's go.
Let's do it. Ready to go.
So kicking off this week's first news story, this one is on the mediacenter.stanfordairport.com. Wow, that's a mouthful. And obviously we are paying tribute to our NHS people across the country every Thursday evening here with the clapping. I hope you're all outside last night clapping. I know we were. So this one is London Stansted, which has created its own special tribute to the heroes of the NHS with a giant thank you message on its airfield. The 10-metre by 7-metre thank you logo now adorns one of the airport's main taxiways adjacent to the runway, and was the brainchild of Ross Barker from Stansted Airfield Operations team. The accolade was created in 5 hours by the airport's specialist airfield painting team on Thursday in advance of the latest Clap for Carers tribute. London Stansted's COO, Steve Griffiths, said, the whole country has come together to recognise the fantastic efforts being made by our brave and brilliant NHS, the healthcare workers, and the tireless fight against the COVID-19. As part of the tribute, colleagues working at the airport joined the weekly Clap for Carers applause, but Ross asked if we could go a bit further and create a special thank you message on the airfield. It's a brilliant idea and very fitting way for the airport to say an even bigger thank you to all those NHS staff working so hard to protect us all at this time of immense difficulty and challenge for them personally. Now, Matt put the pictures up on the screen there while I was reading that story, and it's a great thing. I think this being done here. Obviously, it's a shame we couldn't all just hop into a Cessna 172 and go and have a quick
do a flyby.
Yeah.
You almost want an aircraft in the air, sort of. Like where you do the smoke sort of messages and stuff. Don't you? You want an airplane sort of busy doing that. But I guess that would be classed as non-essential travel, so probably not a good idea.
See that.
But it's good. It's good. Great. Everyone's pulling together. All the industries. I mean, it is a troubling time, especially for the aviation industry now. So
absolutely.
It's good news. So moving on to the next story, and Peter, you've got a Ryanair story.
Yes, number 2. So Ryanair boss has rejected removing middle seats to slow virus. You can find this on Reuters.com. So April 15th from Paris, Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary dismissed mad proposals for planes to fly with empty middle seats when coronavirus travel restrictions end, saying they would be hopelessly ineffective as well as unaffordable. Instead, the Irish low-cost carrier backs the introduction of mandatory temperature checks and face masks for passengers and crew when flights resume, and its chief executive told Reuters. O'Leary was speaking a day after No Frills peer Wizz Air and global airline trade body IATA both said they were preparing for requirements that airlines fly only 2/3 full to allow some social distancing on board. We're in dialogue with regulators who are sitting in their bedrooms inventing restrictions such as taking out the middle seats, which is just nonsense, so Leary said. It would have no beneficial effect whatsoever. Sounds like they're barking up the wrong tree. Vacating every third seat would not in any case maintain the required 2-metre separation between passengers, which is also impossible to enforce at other pinch points during journeys, O'Leary said. People come to the airport in trains without social distancing, he said. You can't do social distancing in the airport, either at check-in, at security, at restaurants or shops. Even the airports admit that. Europe should instead look to Asian markets where some domestic flights are resuming with temperature screening and face masks deployed to reduce risks, the Ryanair chief executive said. That seems to me to be the best that we would be able to manage. It's over to Nev now for the next one.
Quick discussion on that one before we move on.
Oh, yeah.
Removing middle seats. I don't think they're going to remove a middle seat. That'd be a bit difficult, but
I don't think that's really possible.
You can put seat blockers in, such as Neville know. BA Club Europe, that's got a seat blocker in the middle.
It has, yes.
And I think another airline, low cost EasyJet, are talking about blocking out the middle seats as well. But I have to agree with them. Until restrictions are fully lifted, you couldn't have more than one person in a row anyway.
Because, now this is what when we were talking about this in our meeting, when you take away the middle seat, that still doesn't give you a 2-metre gap between you and the person next to you, does it?
No, it gives you the width of your seat. And we're all sat in seats now, and it's about that width. That's not a lot.
Yeah, so that's not 2 metres, isn't it? So I could understand it if you had one person on each row and everybody had to sit in the window seats, for example, if it's a single aisle aircraft, then you could be sure that. But then, of course, you're not 2 meters away from the person behind you, so you've got to miss out a row. I mean, it's just. I don't know.
I'm gonna defend the airlines here real quick. So, as you guys know, I commute on American Airlines, and I think they're doing their best. So they will book everyone in the aircraft, which is not a lot of people, right? I mean, we're talking tomorrow. I'm flying up to work. It's an A320, and I think there's maybe 20 people on it. So the way I've been seeing them do this is if you go online right now, look at a flight, you can see that they've packed everybody towards the back of the airplane. And then shortly before departure, they're doing their best to space people out. So they'll put one at the A seat, and then the next row at the C, and then the next row at the A, and see and so on and stagger folks throughout the aircraft. But you have to balance that with they're trying to make as the minimal money amount possible. They're not going to turn down passengers to keep 3 meters away from another. I mean, they're trying to get every $29 fare that they can get right now, because that's what it's at.
Live.
Yeah.
How is that viable when operating the aircraft will cost a lot more money than that?
I don't think it is. And there was just we're not covering it this week, but there was an internal letter to United Airlines employees saying that it's great that we're getting $5 billion out of this $1 trillion assistance package, but that doesn't even begin to cover our payroll and our operating costs. So the airlines, despite being helped out, at least here in the US, they are still going to lose. And I think we'll talk about it in the Delta Airlines article. They're still losing up to 60 million a day with that many aircraft grounded. And
so, there's an interesting point that Lane Street is. Perhaps you want to comment on this, Armando. And I think you're accepting some kind of risk, though, when you're getting on a plane to begin with, especially in these times. I mean, you would like to think that the people who are in the air who are agreeing to fly certainly to the very best of their knowledge are not flying with symptoms.
Absolutely. And the crazy thing about this virus is often you don't even know that you have the virus. You're asymptomatic. But I will say a lot of the airlines were slow into adopting the masks and the gloves. They were saying, for grooming standards, professional appearances, we're not allowing our employees to wear masks. They relented a little bit a few weeks into the pandemic by allowing employees to wear gloves. And it really wasn't until about 2 weeks ago that I started seeing aircrew with masks on. So the aircrew knows what they're doing. Like you're saying, Matt, I think the passengers know exactly the risk that they're taking. So I think everybody is doing the best that they can right now.
There's an interesting point here again in the chat room. This is why I love this show. The chat room are often far more intelligent than we are. It's Aaron P is actually saying surely that would apply to solo travellers, but obviously families who all live together can also sit together, presumably. So as long as you kept enough space between you and that group, that family, for example, presumably that minimises the risk as well. I mean, there's been a ridiculous furore here in the UK there's a TV programme in the UK here called This Morning that this week has been hosted by two people, Eamon and Ruth, and because they are husband and wife and they live together, but people on Twitter have been going absolutely nuts because they've been sitting next to each other, not social distancing. And you think, well, no, they live together. So it's, you're not having to sort of social distance in your own home unless there is a medical reason behind you needing to do so. But, I mean, would that be something that the fact that the airports and the airlines can take into consideration?
I think we're overthinking it.
Okay, right.
I've seen families go up to the ticket counter and the gate agent or the customer service agent will see them and say, "Hey, are you traveling together?" Mm-hmm. Okay. And then they'll sit them together. It's really not that difficult. Or on an A320, there's 150 seats open. They just tell them, "Okay, we'll sit together." It doesn't have to be that complicated. I mean, you have to take the most common sense approach to things right now.
So, I mean, Andy, what would your thoughts be? I mean, on this. I mean, what do you think is the? I mean, we all acknowledge really everybody wants the airlines back in the air as soon as possible, obviously, because it's not doing. We've all got friends who are really suffering as a result of what's going on here. I mean, is it going to be one of those where we need to sit and wait this out, and then when social distancing stops, that's the time that we all get back in the air? Or, I mean,
it's like everything in aviation. The balance is how you can operate and be safe at the same time. Because of course no airline spends billions of pounds on safety. It's all a balance, and it's the same when it comes to this. At what point will it be safe for two people to be in a row or one person to be in a row? Because like Armando said, some people don't even know they've got it. They don't have a temperature, so that's useless. Face masks, that could work if everybody had to wear them, but it still doesn't reduce the risk completely. So it's all about the risk management. And at that point, at the moment as well, they don't even know if you've had it, you've
whether
you
you're
are immune.
Yeah.
Yeah. So until there's more information, I really don't know. I cannot see, especially in Europe, airlines getting back up to even 50% capacity before July, August.
No.
When we know more about it.
So, Peter, I mean, this is this is a difficult question to answer, I know. But I mean, what are your thoughts, really? I mean, do you think it's where we've got to sit here and wait out until the guidance changes, or is there a way in which the aviation industry can at least generate some money? I mean, as Lane is saying in the chat room here, I mean, he's saying that it is cheaper to operate at a loss than to completely shut down an airline and then try and restart later, which I think is a good point.
I think that in essence is what people are doing. It really depends on the nature of the operation, the size of the airline or the aircraft leased, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things to consider. I mean, obvious things like you leave an engine for a week, it's very difficult to start it up. You leave an A380 out for a long period of time, and it takes a long time and a lot of logistics and a lot of money to get that aircraft just up and running again. So it's this whole balancing act and looking at the finances. And of course, I think I pretty much agree with what everyone's been saying, in that really this thing is very much like how long is a piece of string. You've got the not knowing whether people can get reinfected and so on and so forth. And you get on an aircraft, if there's still people who've got this, then you take a risk. So really it's a question for the airlines to decide, is it wiser for us to keep our aircraft in the air doing something? But one thing's for sure, that certainly in my opinion, is the face of aviation is going to be a lot different when we come out of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And on the point of aircraft storage, actually, Airbus, I know for one, are actually extending all the intervals for maintenance and what needs to be done just to try and help airlines out at the minute with grounding the fleets. And the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK has put extensions on all of our license validities for our license proficiency checks, our medicals, just to try and ease the unknown.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So moving swiftly on then. So we always love to cover stories about fights on aircraft between passengers on the show, as we all do.
Got a lot of Jet 2 story, haven't you?
A Jet 2 story, yeah, exactly. But this week, just for a change, Nev's got a story about aircraft that are having fights.
Yeah, it's just, excuse me. It's weird, isn't it? You'd think that this would be the easy bit, but no, there's often lots of dings on the ground. And travelradar.aero tells us about a report from insiders at Hong Kong International Airport have arisen, stating that a Cathay Pacific Boeing 777 had received tailplane damage after colliding with an Airbus A350 yesterday. Let's have a look at what happened then. Well, it's thought that the A350 belonging to Cathay Pacific was being towed on the ground, having shortly arrived at the airport when the incident occurred. Images from the scene showed the impact on the tailplane of the Boeing 777 and the starboard winglet of the A350 aircraft, with damage to the shape and metalwork of the aircraft, including cracks. It said that the airport's ground controller received a call at 12:30 p.m, alerting them to the incident that had occurred on taxiway Juliet, a taxiway dedicated for aircraft storage amidst the coronavirus pandemic. No passengers are believed to have been on board either aircraft at the time of the incident. And you think, well, that will be the end of that. But no, there's another one, because on Sam Chewy's website, we hear about another ground-based incident where a BA A350 and an Emirates Boeing 777 collide in Dubai. Now, BA are not having much luck with their 350s. They had the one aircraft being painted in, I think it was in Toulouse or somewhere in France, and the paint rig went wrong and damaged something on the plane. And now this has happened to their first A350 actually. So what happened was. It's a question of let's read the piece. The airline, the incident was first reported by Airline Kitty, and it's possible to see that the 13-year-old Boeing 777-300ER was parked on the tarmac at the moment of the incident. The Emirates Boeing 777 with registration Alpha 6 Echo Bravo Romeo arrived yesterday at Dubai from Riyadh. Saudi Arabia. On the other side, the British Airways A350, the registration Golf X-Ray Whiskey Bravo Alpha, was performing a pushback to leave Dubai to Heathrow. The A350 was performing flight British BAW 106 when the incident occurred. The aircraft was due to depart from Dubai at 1:30 and arrive in London at 6:15 local. And there's, I don't know if you've got the pictures here, Matt, but it's possible to see the damage caused on the A350's left horizontal stabilizer. Now, this is obviously Carlos and I went on one of their A350s, which was Bravo, I seem to recall.
Rick Bell reckons that'll buff out. I don't know.
Well, yes, someone's going to get the metal bending stuff on that, aren't they? But I mean, there's quite. I think the trouble is with these larger aircraft, certainly things like the 350s, 777s. You know, there's when airports were designed, these aircraft weren't really around, and although they're suitable and they are authorised to use the various gates and the taxiways and so on, there's a lot more to it now. It's not just a smaller turboprop or an A320 you're dealing with. It's quite a large aircraft, and obviously with the wingspan and the winglets and this sort of stuff, it's very easy for something to go wrong.
There you
here.
go. I've got that picture you were talking about up there now, Nev. I mean, ouch is the short answer to that. Again, I know this is not necessarily Peter's specific area of expertise, but what is is it just a case of replacing the tailpipe, or is it much more involved in that to actually get the aircraft serviceable again in both cases?
I think that you've got a number of considerations. You've got to work out, has the aircraft been stressed in any way? And the tail, as everybody knows, a very critical part of the aircraft. You've got pressure bulkheads, moving parts, and it's a cascade thing. The aircraft maintenance manual gives a lot of information about courses of action. It's actually quite difficult to know what to do, and in the in the worst case scenario, then you do as much as possible, and it's really does depend on what's happened. Somebody driving a baggage truck into a tow bar or something like that has a particular procedure. There's precedent for it, and of course we look at previous history, previous incidents, things that have happened, and hindsight and so on. But generally speaking, there's a lot of zeros behind it, and it's pretty extensive, the repairs required.
Just as you thought there wasn't anything else that could possibly go wrong, on the simpleflying.com website, they tell us about a BA A380 which has crushed a French airport taxiway. Well, this A380 Golf X-Ray Lima Echo Delta tore up the edge of a taxiway at France's Châteauroux Airport, which is where the BA aircraft are being stalled at the moment because they're not flying. So upon arrival at the airport, the aircraft was marshalled into position along with the other Airbus A380s at the airport. However, whilst the plane was moved into place, it rolled onto an area outside of the taxiway that was simply not strong enough to support the heavy giant. Simple Flying believes that the nose gear caused the damage and the aircraft was turning to park at an angle on the taxiway. I don't know if Matt's got some pictures of this, but at this time it remains unconfirmed which wheels dug into the surface, but thankfully the aircraft didn't get stuck and was able to taxi out of the hole it had created. But I think the tarmac repair lads and that is going to have to turn out, aren't they?
I think it's going to need a little bit more than just a pothole filler. Certainly, I think. There's some issues. I mean, that is quite. I'm just trying to get it to come up again. That is quite some deep damage, isn't it? And that's just done by the weight involved of the.
Well, yes, wow. if it's on a part of the taxiway that's not suitable for it, and with an aircraft of that size, there's very specific taxiway routes and where you can and can't park it, not just for wingtip clearance, I would imagine, but for the actual physical weight of the aircraft.
I think they should be glad it was empty as well.
I was just going to say that, yes.
Quite.
If there had been 550 people on it, or whatever it takes these days, that might have been, with a full load of fuel and luggage, that could have been a different story, couldn't it?
Yeah, quite, absolutely. Oof, I think is the word.
Bit of pea shingling now, it'll be all right. So,
Okay.
so moving on to the next story. This one's for you, Andy. And obviously, Andy, as we all know, is an Airbus pilot. So this story, I'm sure, is quite interesting for you, Andy.
Brings me no glee to read it. This is from airlive.net. Boeing has discovered several more software issues in the 737 MAX. The Boeing company has said it will make 2 new software updates to the 737 MAX's flight control computer as it works to win regulatory approval to resume flights after the jet was grounded following 2 fatal crashes in 5 months. The United States plane maker confirmed to Reuters news agency on Tuesday that one issue involves hypothetical faults in the flight control computer microprocessor. Oh, that's a mouthful, which could potentially lead to a loss of control known as a runaway stabilizer. While the other issue could potentially lead to disengagement of the autopilot feature during final approach. Boeing said the software update will address both issues. The Federal Aviation Administration said on Tuesday it is in contact with Boeing as it continues its work on the automated flight control system on the 737 MAX. The manufacturer must demonstrate compliance with all certified standards. The largest US plane maker has been dealing with a number of software issues involving the plane that has been grounded since March 2019, and Boeing has halted production completely in January. The company said neither new software issue has been observed in flight. It said the autopilot issue, flight deck alerts and warnings are already in place to alert the crew if it happened. Boeing said it does not expect the issues to affect its current forecast of a mid-year return to service for the plane. And Boeing said the new software issues are not tied to a key anti-software system known as MCAS, faulted in both fatal crashes. I don't know why it's called anti-software, but there we go.
Now, forgive me for being a little bit. You're probably going to shoot me down in flames with this, but presumably the reason why they're going through all this software with a fine-tooth comb is obviously because of what happened. If you went through the software in an A320, is there not also a very strong chance that you would also find numerous bugs and or errors? Because I assume that these faults that they're talking about are just bugs that they found, because they are literally going through the thing from top to bottom with a fine-tooth comb now. I mean, there is presumably a high chance if they did the same thing with any... I'm just using Airbus as a direct comparison, so we say the 320. Yeah. Surely there is a high risk that you would also find a high number of bugs that could also be
basically what you're asking Andy is, Matt, is does Andy have to press Control-Alt-Delete?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. As if I would, turn it off and on again while you're in the air, right? Yeah.
There's been many problems with the Airbus, or like the 350, the latest aircraft, couldn't leave it switched on for more than 149 hours, otherwise that would mess it all up.
Right.
But they fixed that problem. There's been problems with various ELACs, so elevator and aileron control, the set computers. Over the years, there's been loads of stuff. And every time they update the FMGC system, there's often problems with it.
Yeah.
So, it's just, like you say, because they are digging so deep.
Yeah. The Max is
the 7.3. Yeah.
The Max is very much under the microscope, isn't it? So, I mean, and this is the thing. It's like people have been like, and everybody knows, I mean, the running joke with this show is the fact that I am a ridiculously nervous flyer. But weirdly, when the Max does go back into service, and I have said this before, like when it does go back into service, I'm going to feel more comfortable probably on that aircraft than I am possibly any other aircraft, because they are literally going through it so thoroughly that you sort of, I mean, I guess some stuff will be missed, but, the stuff that's missed is likely to have been very, very minor stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no aircraft's perfect, and it never can be, because it's made by humans. So
fair enough,
there's always going to be problems. That's
true. That is true. I mean, Peter, obviously, this is perhaps not something you're an expert on, obviously, but I mean, what are your feelings on this whole Max, disaster, I suppose, for want of a better word?
First thing, like everybody, is kind of shock and horror, really, that this has happened. Long time ago, I was working at Rolls-Royce Aerospace, and I did a lot of work with computers there. If you write software, you get it right, you test it, and you test it again, and you test it again. I take the view that it's unacceptable that this has happened. It should have been tested. They should have known about angle of attack sensors and other bits and pieces. I take all the points, but what's going on now and what has been going on, the contamination in the fuel systems and so on and so forth. I suppose, from my perspective, being someone who's involved in aviation, I don't have the same specific knowledge that you guys who fly the aircraft have, but it's a different perspective for me. But asking the question, you've got these flagship aircraft going back many years from Boeing, and for me personally, why have we tried to reinvent the wheel, move the engines forward, and now we've got this? It's just a travesty, really. That's how I feel.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Chris Griggs in the chat room is just saying that he was reading a couple of articles in the tech press talking of the age of the computers on the 737 MAX, making it very difficult to write code for them, which is a surprise. They're using two single core 16-bit processors, which is such an old technology. I mean, I guess some of this is also, there was the running joke for ages, wasn't it? Was it the DX266 processor chips that they were using in the spaceships and stuff that NASA were using, because the testing and everything had all been done on those processor chips, and they knew what to expect with those things. So some of it was to do with that. Perhaps this is the reason why they're using such an old technology, perhaps in the 737 MAX. I don't know. Yeah,
it's the same on the Airbus. The Neo has got the same processor chips that the original 1988 320 had. And the amount of info that they have to try and put through it, when it comes to the coding of it, they've got to try and find the most efficient way to code.
Right. Just because you haven't got the overheads. Armando, you were trying to chip in there.
Yeah, here's a question for both Andy and Peter. So a lot of these 737 MAX issues have been discovered while they're all sitting in storage. What do you think? So with tens of thousands of aircraft parked around the world right now in varying ages, do you think if the engineers started going through each one of them, addressing all the squawks, do you think that, something like the MD-80 or the Park 757s, we would start seeing trend issues as they have nothing but time to go through them and start looking at different components?
Don't know. Shall I take that?
Yeah.
So you're saying that the older aircraft, you're going to find issues with them as well? Is that the sort of thrust of your question, really?
Yeah, exactly. If you have if you have the time to look for it, will you start finding things?
Yeah, well, again, it's difficult to know. For me personally, again, I don't fly the Airbus, but I sit as a passenger on many, many flights because I travel around the world, do a lot of inspections, and I often am sat in an A320 quite a lot of the time, and I also do the engine ground run training on some of these aircraft. And I think that the facts speak for themselves. The fact that to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the aircraft you're talking about, they rely less or more on computers, depending on what they're doing. And you can just look back, it's quite obvious really, you can look back at the history, and a lot of them just work. My opinion, I'm not sort of taking sides here in terms of aircraft, but the A320 just seems to work so long as you fly it properly and you understand the systems. Yeah, granted, there are plenty of instances where people aren't trained on something or this, that, or the other, and that's the human error factor coming in. But it is possible to code something in an unparadoxical way, get it so that it will work, and you've not got bits of code contradicting each other. I mean, these are aircraft. We're talking about computer systems controlling control surfaces, and there's redundancy there. But I personally don't think, certainly with the aircraft that have some degree of computer integration, I don't think we'll see much of an issue. But if we look a little closer to home, maybe being slightly subtle, you may find some issues in brothers or sisters of the MAX, and I'll let you guess about that.
Yeah,
this is where I must be going wrong. I must be flying the Airbus wrong. I have found, especially with the 320, if you leave it for a few days, and I think Matt said this when he was on last, it can be a bit of a dog. Or even, I remember a couple of years back, I was sent out to Milan to pick up an aircraft that had been sat in freezing rain all day. We put the batteries on and it immediately started to smell of burning.
Oh, brilliant.
So we just switched it off and got an engineer, and they came along and told us, "Start away, it's fine, just put it on." And sure enough, it went away after 5 minutes.
Yes.
So they are pretty resilient bits of kit.
Yeah, I suppose this is the thing. Also, again, interesting points here in the chat room here is like one thing that Lane is saying is rather interesting. Call your bank and ask them what software they're running. I know, and then Laura Davis is actually saying, and I do remember this shout out, and it was only a couple of years ago because ironically I actually have COBOL training as well. She said it's like all the calls out for COBOL programmers for unemployment systems, for example. I mean, so many of the systems that the first computer systems that we're still relying on the backbone of are like literally, sort of like Unix or based running COBOL software. I mean, it's just like crazy stuff, really, isn't it? I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? If the computers are tried and tested and known to be reliable, then it's a brave person that changes that for a different chipset.
I saw Tony S has said that they've been better off with the Commodore 64.
Yes.
The chipset in the A320 is actually the chipset from a Commodore 64. That's not a joke.
Oh, wow. Oh, goodness me.
It's the same Motorola chipset.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt, how are you feeling about flying now, huh?
I have no words to say. I'll just shut my mouth and move on. Sorry, Carlos. Perhaps you could dig me out of this hole, please.
I was just going to say, actually, Matt. Next time Matt flies anywhere, he's going to take his plug-in controller and see if he can fly the aircraft.
Yeah,
just in case. So yeah,
I'm currently bidding on a joystick at the moment. If I win that, then I'll take that with me and plug in.
As long as it's got a serial port connection.
Oh, good.
I was just about to say, isn't that what they do in the Airbus? You just take your Xbox controller and you plug it in, right?
That's it. Yeah, we've got fancy USB sockets now.
Oh, I see. Anyway, moving on, ladies and gentlemen.
Moving on. Next up, Armando has got actually, I don't know if it's a good news story. I think it is, because at least it's some kind of good news for aircraft sales, Armando.
This story is from airlinerwatch.com, and it's Delta Airlines takes over an order for 10 Airbus A350 extra wide-body jets from the LATAM group. Delta agreed with the LATAM and Airbus last fall for the agreement. The American carrier said it had deferred several of the near-term deliveries and was working with Airbus on options across its entire order book. A Delta spokeswoman said that the 10 A350 aircraft, which stem from Delta's tie-up agreement with Chilean carrier LATAM, would be delivered through 2025. The deal firms up a planned switch first announced when the two carriers forged their alliance in 2019, and whose completion was partially disclosed in the manufacturing data issued last week. The formal transfer of the jet order, worth roughly $3 billion at list prices at least, coincides with Delta and other U.S. airlines negotiating government aid to help them meet their payroll costs while dealing with a drastic drop in air travel demand because of the pandemic. Delta Chief Executive Ed Bastian told employees on Tuesday that the airline would receive a $5.4 billion in U.S. government payroll support that would protect jobs through September 30th, but continued to encourage workers to consider taking unpaid leaves of absence as it weathers a 95% decline in passenger traffic. Bloomberg News reported on April 14th, citing people with knowledge of the matter, that Delta had agreed to sell and lease back aircraft valued at $1 billion as part of its effort to raise cash while it continues talks about the U.S. government aid. Delta did not comment specifically on that. However, it's reported that Delta Airlines is losing up to $60 million a day. Over a third of its employees are on unpaid leave. It has stored the majority of its fleet, and the airline expects these billions of dollars from the U.S. government as part of the current administration's plan to bail out the country's airline industry. So,
thoughts?
It's good that they're taking up this order. At least that means that they're going to have to produce these aircraft. You know, they're going to go and be sold and produce a income for the manufacturer itself.
Yeah.
But
I think, we're facing this challenge right now. They have parked their MD-80s, they're parked their 7.5, 7.6s, but you still have to look forward. Like Andy was saying, what is it going to look like when we come out of this? And the A350 is just a much more efficient aircraft than these older aircraft. So you still have to plan for the future of the airline when we come out of it.
No, that's true. Anyway, we seem to have a bit of a running theme in today's show, which involves incidents involving aircraft at airports. So, Carlos, perhaps you could fill us in on the next incident.
Yeah, it's certainly. I mean, we should sort of rename this show the one where everyone's
crashing
dinged
into
their
everyone.
aircraft, crashing. Yeah. So this one's on the Aviation Herald, Simon's awesome site we all know and love, and this is an accident, an Omni Boeing 767-300ER. This was back on the 8th of March this year. This one was an Omni Air 767-300ER registration, November 477 Alpha X-ray. This was performing flight Oscar Yankee 346 from Bangor to Shannon in Ireland with 181 people on board. It landed on Shannon's runway 24 in the evening and bounced when it touched down hard a second time. The tower had reported winds from 270 degrees at 20 knots, maximum of 35 knots, and advised of turbulence at the touchdown zone. The aircraft rolled out without further incident and taxied to the apron. While taxiing to the apron, the tower inquired whether they had had any turbulence over the touchdown zone, which the crew affirmed there was. There were no injuries. The aircraft sustained substantial damage, however. Matt's putting the picture on the screen, you'll be able to see some very serious creasing on the fuselage. So post-flight inspection revealed creases all around the forward fuselage. Ireland's Air Accident Investigation Unit, the AAIU, dispatched investigators on site. The current aircraft, which is still on the ground in Shannon after its arrival. And on the 10th of March, the Aviation Herald received more photos, which Matt put on there on the screen for you guys and girls to look at from the Boeing response team. And they are actually on about getting a repair of the aircraft organised. On the April the 12th this year, 2020, the NTSB reported the occurrence was rated as an accident and is being investigated by Ireland's AAIU. There were no injuries, as I said, among all the passengers on board. Now, it's safe to say the pictures that Matt showed and the pictures on the Aviation Herald website, the damage, in my view, is quite severe, I think. And looking at the age of the aircraft, this aircraft is just over 18 years old.
Again, Rick doesn't agree. He thinks, again, that'll buff out. But it's so this is from basically a hard, turbulent landing, is it? Because, I mean, that's quite a crease, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite a severe crease. I mean, this has happened before. We've seen this before. I think about a year ago or 2 years ago, we covered a story where an aircraft had a similar incident like this on a hard landing, where the fuselage had creased. I know that aircraft was scrapped, but I mean, thoughts, guys? I mean, this aircraft is over 18 years old.
Yeah, it's a very old aircraft, but I remember there was a first choice 767 at Bristol a few years back that had similar damage, and that got repaired. But I think that was younger. It's interesting because that sort of wind, I'm guessing this was during, what date was it? Yeah, beginning of March. So that was during one of the storms, Kira or Dennis or whatever it was. Yeah, I was flying during that with similar winds to this, and it's hard work.
Yeah, I bet.
Is 181 people on one of them a lot or not much for a 767?
It's not quite full.
Because if it was quite light, then an aircraft in gusty conditions, I often say it's like trying to fly a crisp packet. It can be really hard work.
Yeah.
So you never know the full situation here, do you? It doesn't say if it was a training flight or anything like that. That is nasty.
Omni is traditional. They've been around since the early 90s as a charter. They have a Part 121 certificate, but they're largely a charter. So I've flown on Omni on their old DC-10s out to the Middle East and back. They do a lot of military charters. So they've had quite a few different aircraft, but they're currently all 767s and 777s. But Chris Griggs brought up the 75 in the Azores. That one had a pretty good crease, and they took a couple months. Remember, we did a story on that. They sent some engineers out there in a team, and they fixed it, and it flew again. Yeah. I don't know if it flew out to Roswell to be chopped up, but it flew again.
Also, Lane saying, because 18 years is not actually that old for an aircraft, is it?
No, technically it's not. I mean, there's Mad Dogs. I'm not going to say which airline that are quite considerably older than that. But I mean, when you look at some of the aircraft, I mean, there's commercial airliners still in use now across the globe, 40 plus years old. I suppose it just depends on how serious structural wise if you
look at the creases along the top on that picture, that needs entirely replacing.
Yeah,
huge sections. That's big money.
So I mean, is there going to be frame structural issues off the back of this as well? I mean, because that crease will have occurred because of unexpected movement within the frame that's around that skin, isn't it? I mean, presumably there's some other issues there.
Not my department.
No, okay, fair enough.
I wonder if when these aircraft go into maintenance, which they obviously have to do, where they employ the same sort of people that they employ at your local fast exhaust fitting company.
He says choosing his words carefully, yes.
Oh, mate, that's got to be a complete new panel or a complete new part. We can't patch that up.
There is that.
The lovely Dr. Steph says, go listen to APG from last week, and Miami Rick does a good explanation as to why the 767 is especially prone to this kind of damage.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but don't do that right now, obviously.
Not now. No.
No, you need 4.5 hours to do that.
Oh, steady. Okay, on to the next story then, please.
Peter, you've got some good news for East Midlands.
Thank goodness for that.
Well, I mean, it's kind of nice for me. I'm from that neck of the woods, and my dad used to take me to East Midlands to watch Concorde landing. So
wow!
Started my PPL there and did my work experience there. So this is nice.
I can say a lot of love for that airport for you.
Yeah. But there we go. So East Midlands joins Europe's Airport Premier League. So a small Leicestershire airport that last year ranked only 13th in the UK in passenger numbers has now joined Frankfurt, Heathrow and Paris Charles de Gaulle in the European top 10 for flight movements. Figures released by Eurocontrol, the Brussels-based air navigation authority, show that East Midlands Airport joined the Premier League with 99 arrivals and departures on Thursday. The figure put it ahead of key European hubs, including Madrid, Rome and Munich. So East Midlands handles a significant number of cargo flights and has seen the number of aircraft movements drop by only 54%, compared with the Europe-wide average of 91%. Heathrow Airport has lost its perennial place as Europe's busiest to Frankfurt. The German airport handled 229 flights on Thursday, compared with only 184 at the London airport. Third place is taken by Leipzig, another key freight hub. It is the only airport to lose fewer than half of its flights compared with the same day in 2019. With a 28% decline, the East German hub handled 78 flights on Thursday. Paris, Charles de Gaulle, Cologne, Bonn and Amsterdam take 4th, 5th and 6th places respectively. Norway features in 7th and 8th position. Bergen and Oslo are handling passenger flights to several domestic destinations as well as international operations to Germany and Qatar. So there we are.
Wow, I like that.
Never flown from East Midlands Airport, I will say. It's one of the few airports in the UK I've not flown from.
I sort of visited it for the hotel that I was staying. I went to go and visit Mila while she was on a layover there actually, and we were on the my room was on the top floor, which was great, and we were able to actually look over at the airport and watch a lot of the activities. And like breakfast was great. We would literally be having breakfast and stop talking halfway through because there'd be something quite cool taking off. There was quite a lot of as I say, mainly cargo stuff actually, certainly at the time of the morning that we were having breakfast. But fond memories.
The last time I flew from East Midlands was in a Falcon 2000 in the jump seat between the two pilots,
Wow!
Who were employed by a well-known yellow excavating company manufacturer just up the road.
Get you.
So we flew into, where did we go to? Oh, Le Bourget, that's right, yeah. To pick up some customers of theirs, as you do.
Well, I was spoilt rotten back in the olden days. When I did my work experience at East Midlands, they said if you write to the airline, tell them that you're interested in aviation, you can ride in the jump seat. And so managed to do quite a few of those, but those days are gone now, unfortunately.
Sadly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, now the next story is with you, Nev, and I noticed there's the currency in this particular article is one of great concern. Are you going to avoid that, or
I'm not going to mention the currency name because I will not be able to continue the article.
Good luck with that, sir.
But this is on simpleflying.com, so that's good. So there's a good font to begin with, and we like that, obviously. It says that Bamboo Airways is launching a flight pass program. Participants can pay a one-time fee and fly an unlimited number of flights with the carrier through to October the 28th. In addition, flight pass members will also get a host of other benefits, including a resort credit, which sounds nice, doesn't it? So the cost of the airline doing this is Vietnamese currency 9.8 million, which equates to about 420. That can't be right. Yeah, I think it is actually 420 US dollars. I would have thought it'd be more than that somehow, which is an amazing deal for an unlimited number of flights. So perhaps it is. Yeah, perhaps it is right. Members have access to all the domestic flights until October the 28th of this year. Passengers on this plan can fly free on the basic fare of the Bamboo Eco ticket with 15 kilos of checked baggage and another 7 kilos of hand baggage. Travel must be secured, however, at least 24 hours before departure. In addition, subscribers will also receive free 3 days and 2 nights credit at an FLC resort. According to the airline, this is worth 9.6 million of their currency alone. Passengers will also receive an Emerald Club card, which is the lowest tier of Bamboo Club, the airline's frequent flyer program. Emerald Club members receive priority arrangement to rebook flights in case of irregularity. Another program that the airline is offering is the Bamboo Pass business voucher. Passengers can choose to buy a set number of round-trip business class flights on the busy Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City route at any time of the year. The unlimited flight pass is a special promotion until the 28th of October also. For this program, passengers can buy 12 business class tickets to be used within 3 months of activation and 1 free night at an FLC resort for 58,860,000 of Vietnamese currency, or about 2,000 US dollars. 20 tickets are available for 91,500,000 of their currencies, or about 3,900 US dollars with 2 free nights at an FLC resort within 3 months of the voucher application. Well, why are they doing this? Well, this is nothing new. And that being said, they're actually not very common. But from April the 16th, Bamboo Airways will start to resume its domestic flight schedules. This voucher is certainly a way for the airline to earn some cash and encourage people to travel with the airline. Amid this period of downturn, airlines are trying to sell as many tickets as possible, which is very true indeed, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Now, I'd like to get in touch with Bamboo Airways because I've got a new strapline for them.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Brace yourselves, everyone.
With Bamboo Airways, your dong goes a long way.
My goodness me. There is...
Matt, where's the soundboard? Matt, come on.
Which, well, I mean, I've got so many to choose from. We'll just go with this one. Yeah, that'd be a no.
I thought that was good.
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, all right, I'll change my mind. There you go. I could go the other way.
Well, we've heard about that, yes. Yeah.
Anyway,
dear.
Gloss over that and move
Honestly,
on.
move on to the next one, yeah. So, moving on to Andy. Actually, Andy, it's your turn next with
yes.
This is a very troubling story.
Yeah, so this one's also from simpleflying.com. It's an Air France Airbus A330 is shot at twice after landing in the Congo. So on Saturday, April the 11th, an Air France Airbus A330 was shot at twice after landing in Pointe-Noire in the Republic of Congo. The plane was operating the flight from Paris to Pointe-Noire and was on a rescue mission to repatriate some 100 French nationals from the Central African nation. The plane was then set to continue on to Bangui in the Central African Republic to pick up 120 more passengers. The aircraft was attacked at 8 p.m. local time, according to Brazza News, and 2 shots were fired at the aircraft. The weapon was, I don't know how they managed to do this, was identified as a PMAC assault rifle, which is in use by the Congolese armed forces, local police, and the gendarmerie. The shooter was a member of the airport gendarmerie and was on duty at the time, according to Le Echos. They aimed and fired 2 shots at the plane. Fortunately, no one was injured in the shooting, and the person involved has been arrested and taken into custody. According to local reports, the person firing the weapon may have been intoxicated. However, the reason behind the shooting is not yet known, and we expect a full report will be released in time. One bullet managed to puncture the fuselage of the 330 completely, while the second bullet hit the tarmac. And the aircraft was 17 years old, being delivered back to Airbus in 2003. Air France was quick to respond, confirming that the incident did indeed take place, although no official report has been published. And their tweet says that the flight scheduled for 10 a.m. was postponed for 24 hours in order to allow replacement aircraft and crew to be transported from Paris Charles de Gaulle. And the customers have been warned and taken care of by our local teams. The safety of our customers and our crew is our top priority.
Right.
So there you go.
Okay. Which is the most generic response to any incident like ever. I mean, I guess that's the sort of standard response that one would expect. I know, but
well, this guy was blatantly a Boeing lover, you know, and he just lost it, you know,
lost his marbles. Yes. Okay. All right. I mean, I'm not sure that's going to wash in court. I've got to be honest.
No, actually, funny you say the word wash, Matt, because by that picture which is on this story, that's something that Air France obviously do not do very often with their aircraft.
Never wash them. Never.
Right. Okay. Bit grubby then. Yeah.
That is honestly. There's a few pictures actually on another one of these stories for these aircraft, and they're incredibly dirty on the outside of these aircraft.
The cleanest Air France aircraft at Charles de Gaulle is the Concorde that hasn't flown.
Yeah.
Well,
okay, I got complaints from Dave Abbey. He says, Matt, don't blow the soundboard all at once. I think I got a bit carried away there earlier. And also, it was, I say, Tony S is sort of, I think, picking up Rick's mantle here, saying, get your buffer out, Rick. I think it's, he's convinced also that those holes will also buff out. So there we are. When it's, people are worrying unnecessarily, I think.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next story, Peter. Obviously, Peter, you are a PPL holder, so you are well attuned to flying these particular aircraft and these stories.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of stories here, and first one is a GA aircraft in North America. This is from CBC. And so thanks to Sergey, I think, for sending this in and bringing it to our attention. Pilot was forced to land his small aircraft on Highway 40 in Quebec City on Thursday morning around 10:30 a.m. Thursday, the pilot of the Piper Cherokee aircraft called the Quebec City Fire Department, asking permission to land on the highway just a few kilometres south of the Jean-Lesage International Airport. Fire Department spokesman Bill Noonan said the plane had already landed safely when emergency crews arrived on site. Pilot was not injured. Good job. Well done. Skillful flying there. Traffic was halted for less than an hour while emergency crews escorted the plane off the highway. Quebec Provincial Police confirmed a mechanical problem forced the pilot to make the surprise landing. So a bit of a precautionary landing there. The video footage. So,
goodness me, this is...
This was a PA-28 Cherokee, Peter. Is this something you've flown before?
I fly the Archer, very similar, very similar in many respects, but nice aircraft. But yeah, these things happen. And
I was going to say nice landing actually, because he managed to not hit any other cars, and You know, it's.
Yeah.
I've seen cars travel closer together than that aircraft. It has to be said.
And what amuses me about this video really is that obviously you've got all these cars on the highway that are following this aircraft landing in front of them, and then the pilot obviously very kindly pulls over to the right-hand side of the freeway, but then all the other cars that are coming up behind him just slow down and slowly move around him and carry on driving up the road with no, it's a plane just landed.
I have to say it's a pretty spectacular bit of flying there, because he managed to thread it between the road signs, and then also there are some pretty significant light poles on the left side there. So I'm surprised that nobody slowed down, just to give him a little bit of buffer. But I saw some hazards on, I suppose.
So, but there's a second incident, Peter, though, on this.
Yeah, there's another one from Cincinnati.com. A small plane bound for Lunken Airport was forced to land on Interstate 75 near Cincinnati on Thursday, closing the highway for more than 6 hours, while crews worked to remove the aircraft. Police said that the pilot, 61-year-old John Bennett of Indianapolis, landed safely, hitting no other vehicles, but coming to rest against a concrete barrier. Bennett was unharmed. Federal Aviation Administration spokeswoman Elizabeth Isham Corey said that the single-engine 1996 Beechcraft Bonanza made its emergency landing en route to Lunken Airport. She said Bennett reported a loss of engine power. Lieutenant Steve Saunders said Bennett, the only occupant of the plane, stayed on the scene to assist in the investigation. So, again, skillful flying with slightly less time with an engine problem. So, but still, nonetheless, very skillful stuff.
Have you flown the Beechcraft Bonanza, Armando?
I have, yeah. Megan and I actually almost bought a Bonanza. It was a P-35 V-tail Bonanza. We almost bought that aircraft instead of the Lancer. Love the airplane. Bonanzas are just classic aircraft. But regarding this incident, I got my instrument rating a long time ago in Cincinnati's Lunken Field. And I will say there's pretty challenging terrains. Lunken Field was the original Cincinnati airport, and it sits pretty close to the city, to downtown, and surrounding all of Cincinnati are hills. So it's pretty rugged terrain, not a lot of straight stretches of road there. Even that highway that he landed on is a pretty curvy highway, and you can see from some of the pictures that he managed to put it down on a curve. But the alternative is to put it down into a hill, which is challenging to do when you're dead sticking it, or into the woods somewhere. So good job to both of these pilots.
Yeah.
Like it.
So,
it's still things that I don't think anybody would want to do again. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
It only makes you stronger, right?
Yeah, there is that. Next story is with you,
Armando.
Slightly
this
lighter.
Is awesome. Yeah, love this.
This is a good story. This Keflavik airport firefighters dance and delights. So a video of a group of dancing firefighters at Keflavik International Airport has been widely watched since it was posted on YouTube a couple days ago. Numerous first responders, including police officers and firefighters, have in recent days posted videos of themselves dancing, intended to cheer up the rest of us. We wanted to participate and decided to make this video, says Orvar Birkeson. This was the whole crew. All of us took part in it. We love to be able to cheer up so many people. We try to do something positive under these unfortunate circumstances in society and show solidarity. The goal was to entertain. And the video is dedicated to nurses, healthcare professionals, emergency responders everywhere. And it's got a pretty good soundtrack, and they got some pretty good dance moves, I will say.
Absolutely. I mean, we're playing the video while you're talking about it here, Armando. I mean, it's. I love anything like this. I mean, you know, if you have got some unexpected downtime, then why not let them make the most of these things? That's what I say.
They really did push all everything out for this video.
Yeah,
they've got like fire. They've got
set
actual
fire to an aircraft.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And
well, just like airplanes, they got to run the trucks and they got to run the pumps and run water through. So I got to make sure those things are tip top.
And they keeping fit by dancing.
Well, quite. Yes, that's perhaps not where they were going with that, but yeah. Okay. Okay.
So the last story in the commercial segment this week. This is a video to play out that we're going to comment on, Matt.
Yes, there is. It's a well, I guess it's kind of like a promo video, isn't it? But let's have a listen to the video first, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
For over 16 years, Etihad has been flying from Abu Dhabi to the world. On a typical day, the airline conducts over 220 flights, but in late March of 2020, something unprecedented happened.
The leadership of Abu Dhabi has very wisely decided to close our airport for inbound and outbound traffic.
At the direction of the UAE government, over 100 aircraft returned to Abu Dhabi, and for most of them, their engines went silent. Etihad's cargo freighters are still in the air, and some aircraft are being flown on critical routes in order to get people home. But what about the rest of them? What happens to those aircraft as they wait to take to the skies again?
I've never seen anything like this before in my aviation career. At the moment, we have about 80% of the fleet in the parking mode. There's a lot of things we have to do. We have to cover the engine intake and exhaust to protect internal workings from the environment, such as the sand and dust. The sensors all have to be blocked. Lots of other items, such as disconnecting batteries to preserve the aircraft. We have engineers working around the clock maintaining the aircraft. They're a very intricate, complex piece of machinery. It's not like parking a car, we have to keep them maintained. So we will be running engines, powering up the aircraft, checking the flight controls while these aircraft are in the parking mode. In the hangars, we have aircraft undergoing heavy maintenance checks. We're also doing a cabin refresh. All the passenger seats will be checked individually. So far, we've replaced 10,000 seat covers and backrest covers. All the carpets are being shampooed and washed. We have about 200 people per shift working just on this.
We work closely with fleet management to advance some of the maintenance checks that are due later, whether it's a 777 or a 787 or a 380. We're taking every opportunity during this time, including product improvement. We do this maintenance to the best standard, best quality.
We're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When our aircraft go back into service, for the passenger, it will be like getting onto a brand new aircraft. Once the world starts returning to normal, we will be ready.
So yeah, so we still get the idea there, but it's and this is one of the sort of questions that really I have on all of this is obviously they're alluding there to the work that's involved. There's been a lot of aircraft basically that have been on the ground for so long. What is involved when an aircraft has been on? So they're using this as an opportunity perhaps to sort of refresh cabins and all that kind of thing. And I dare say there's a lot of airlines that are doing the same. Obviously, this is Etihad that are doing this in the video that we were just playing there. But perhaps if we could start with Peter on this one. What is the when they've been done? I mean, again, like and Armando was saying at the top of the show, obviously, because he was doing a bit of flying with the parachute plane, because obviously aircraft don't like to be sat on the ground.
That's right. So if I perhaps talk specifically about the engines, probably the most valuable part of the whole aircraft, very sensitive to many things, the environment, but one thing they don't like to be doing is sitting there doing nothing. And one of the things that's going to be required, which is one of my roles, is boroscoping. So all those aircraft that have been sat there require a boroscope inspection. So that's one of the things they'll need to check for. And if you've got aircraft sat there, then, well, they have to be protected from birds, insects, sand, the environment. And you've got to stop stuff going in engines. I mean, a colleague of mine did an inspection, found a live scorpion in the engine. There's nothing in the manual that says, what do you do if you find a live scorpion?
How you deal with that? Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
and this is the thing, because I mean, you can put the biggest amount of protection and stuff all over things like the engine covers. I mean, you could do all the obvious things, but as you say, I mean, insects, mice, and all sorts will find their way in there. I mean, where on earth do you start with an inspection when there's been so many on the ground for so long?
I would say engines is the most logical place, because a lot of airlines, lease companies, and things are thinking about the assets, and they're thinking about cost and the time involved. But of course, I'm just let the other gents talk about the other parts. But you know, you've got to. The engines have to be inspected as a matter of course, really. Any kind of deposits, things that have gone in the engine, a sandstorm, things like that, and that's no go. That's got to be clean. That's got, you know, an engine wash, and so on and so forth. So, you know.
So, I mean, from a pilot's point of view, I'll throw this obviously to Andy. So, you've got. I mean, I know there's some procedures in place, if you like, to make sure that people's type ratings and things don't basically become invalid during this slightly odd time. But I mean, there's obviously, I don't know, part of me sort of wonders if there was not a way of somehow getting some of the sort of training done, if you like, so that when we are able to sort of get back in the air, that you can just, like, go nuts.
Well, I think that's the plan for my airline. So while we're furloughed, we can still undertake training, but it's just, and the training that we'll do as well won't be the standard license proficiency check or the other 6 monthly check that we do. It will be a return to service sort of package for us, because pilot skills, as much as we like to say we're great, they go rusty if we don't fly. And legally, still at the moment, we've got to do 3 takeoff and landings every 90 days.
Right.
Those can be done in the simulator.
Okay.
A proper level D simulator. And then, as I said before, all the licenses have been extended and the medicals have been extended in this situation to try and get us through. But the things that we'd have to do in the sim really is just recapping certain emergency procedures and just proving that our knowledge is still there. I think as well that we normally have to do a 6 monthly theoretical knowledge exam as well. And at the moment, we don't have to do that. It was due in this month, but they're going to put together a small tech refresher package for us as well.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, that sort of thing is sort of, if you like, sort of doing some forward training and stuff. Again, Peter, with your experience of engines and stuff, is there some sort of is there like maintenance and stuff that can perhaps be brought forward during this time? Perhaps does it almost like get ahead before they go back into service? Perhaps.
You sort of yes and no. It's possible there are things that need to be done, but the logistics tend to, as I'm sure you will appreciate, take precedence. And if you've got to store that aircraft somewhere, if that aircraft is sat in a hangar waiting for checks to be done, then that's costing a different amount of money to if it's sat out, at the cheapest possible airport being stored. It's possible, but really and truly, that's difficult. I think in some small cases, you might be able to do some maintenance, I would imagine.
It all depends where the aircraft's been stored as well, because everywhere's got different. Take far north Siberia in the winter, temperatures drop to -40. Rubber can perish. Plastic parts can perish. Then in Europe, humidity can be a problem. So mildew. The Middle East is mainly, as Peter said, the locusts. Swarms of locusts can have 80 million locusts right in the middle of them, and they get in all the holes. Caribbean, salty and humid. So it all depends really where it's been stored on what work they can do.
Now, actually, because obviously you're involved in the A320 podcast, and episode 102 was more or less on this very subject, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Because a lot of people don't understand the difference between parking and storing an aircraft, because they're two very different things.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So
one of the things that I thought the other day is that obviously this is not the first video we've seen of aircraft being stored and parked up across the globe, including in the UK. And all those aircraft have got the engine covers, like the pitot tube covers, and all the various covers that go on all the relevant parts of the aircraft. We used to store and a handful of aircraft in the UK with proper engine covers and stuff on. Now we're storing hundreds and hundreds of aircraft that all need covers, that all need all the actual proper covers that go over all the various parts. There must be a shortage of these specialist parts.
Every aircraft comes with them.
Ah, there we go.
So it's part of your. If you're an airline that does a lot of long trips, that's called the flyaway kit. It's in there. All the parts are there for all the static ports, pitot, tube covers. It's a bit like when you buy a car and you get all the spare bulbs in the boot, with the spare tire.
So are these carried on the aircraft at all times, then, Andy?
Not the big stuff like that. No. We have the gear pins in ours for any maintenance stuff, and certain flags for if the engines have been opened that they have to put in to make sure they close them properly. But all the main covers stay in our central hangar.
Okay.
Now, here's a point. So at Pittsburgh, I've seen a lot of the maintenance crews going out there and using, speed tape and plastic covers for all those things that don't come with a cover. So the static ports, the NACA vents, some of the exhaust ports, something like that. And I remember there was a mishap back in the late 80s or early 90s where there was an Aero Peru 737 that crashed into the ocean because it had duct tape over the AOA the AOA sensors of the static ports when it was coming out of maintenance. So what risk mitigation techniques do you think the maintenance crews are taking nowadays to assure that? Because there are those covers, but then there's all this extra stuff that they're putting on there. What do you guys think?
Well, if I come in, I think it's quite simple, really. If something's not supposed to have a cover on it, then it doesn't have a cover on it, according to the AMM. And if it does, it has the right one. If you haven't got it, you buy it, install it with the aircraft. You reminded me earlier on what Andy was saying. I was chatting to one chap, I think it was in Iceland, actually. He used to work across in North Canada, and he was saying that one of his jobs was, during that period of time, was to basically sit with the aeroplane with the packs on all day long while the aircraft was there, so that nothing froze over and they could fly out. Literally just sat there, packs on, that's my job. The environmental factors and mitigation of that. I think maintenance can only do so much. They have to check before that aircraft is released and handed over to you guys. That's got to be really thoroughly checked. Then, of course, pilot has to go around and really kind of check again, but not quite to the same level because there's just not the time. Engine intake's clear. We often see with boroscopes, we will often see, you see something like a red deposit and you think, what's that? And you think, a favourite thing for people to do is take the blank off something and leave it in the engine intake. The wind blows, goes round, captain comes up, has a look, or first officer, nothing in the intake, engine started, down it goes, So you have to be really careful. But also FOD, when everybody gets on the aircraft, you know what happens? You go for your pockets. Where's my boarding pass? You pull all this junk out your pocket, goes onto the ground, blows down the airport. So I think everybody has to really overlap each other, and just be careful about.
Don't forget that all important coin. You toss into the engine.
Yeah.
Oh, that you toss
good
in the
luck.
engine. Yeah, absolutely.
Good luck.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's all good luck.
Some airlines have come up with further mitigation measures, such as writing in the tech log that they've opened the engine cowls and then having to write in the tech log again that they've closed them.
Yeah.
I've seen some other ones where they put a cover over the throttle quadrant, like that covers the levers to show that they do maintenance, and once it's finished and they've checked everything, then they remove that cover. So obviously if that's still left on, we know there's something not right. But again, as Peter said, we've got to check everything. The circuit breakers, which there's hundreds of, we've got to make sure they're all in as well, and just try our best in the short time that we have doing the walk around that we try and cover all the major bits.
I mean, presumably there's going to be, when everybody does all go back to work, there's going to be perhaps people are going to take a little bit more time than they would normally, I guess, to do their walk around because they have been sort of sat on the ground for so long.
What is the time limit that you're given, Andy, for your walk around? Is there a specific time that you have to take to do the walk rounds?
No, there's no time limit. There is a prescribed route, around the aircraft and what you're looking for. It just, I guess it's people's nature. If it's freezing cold outside, you can try and look at that pretty quick. If it's a lovely, warm, sunny day, you'll take your time walking around. Again, there's no time limit. You've just got to try and remain thorough and professional and do your job properly. But you can easily at times say the fueler comes up to you and wants the fuel figure or wants something signed. You can have missed a little bit that you didn't notice or even think about, because sometimes you can do 4 walk-arounds a day, depending on the weather and who's flying the aircraft. So it can easily become very repetitive, and then you can become complacent with it. So you've got to really try every time.
Interestingly, we're getting a couple of questions for Peter, actually, here. This one's from Neil Lanwarn in the chat room, and he's actually saying, what's the weirdest thing that you've ever found in an engine?
Hi, Neil. That's a good question. I've heard stories of other people, nests of birds. To be honest, the weirdest things that I've ever found in an engine, you can't really identify them. There was an engine that was left in the desert. In fact, and it had what looked like some insect eggs. That's the only thing I can describe it. When you've got a sensitive borescope camera with a very sensitive lens, and you can change the lens, something like a spider looks like King Kong, and you're out. It'll be 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning and freezing cold, and you're borescoping, and all of a sudden the spider hits the lens. It's quite a shock. But a colleague of mine had a job in the Far East where an aircraft, I think it was Airbus, had been left for 2 years outside, and there was no preservation or anything done. And it wasn't so much finding stuff in the engine, in that when he went into the cockpit and turned the packs on, a swarm of Asian hornets came into the cockpit. Now, you can't just run off. You can't run off because you're in charge of that aircraft. So that literally it was shirts up like this and just try and remain calm. So these are all considerations, because they'll get right in and make themselves at home.
Wow. Okay.
Ouch.
Yeah. We do love to get pictures of where people are watching the show from. Ooh. And as always, Mr. Warner is very much hard at work in his train. That's always very comforting. Thanks for that. And Armando, you've got a couple of critters who have, well, they look like they've nodded off, I've got to be honest.
Lois Lane is still listening. Benny and the Jets, not so much.
Right.
I think he's past that. Those are my 2 puppies.
The short answer to that story is, clearly by this picture, you are spoiling them. Look, they are making themselves very all right for some, isn't it?
So, moving on, we have got, obviously, one of the best audio-visual producers in the entire country on the show, as in Neville Bounds. Now, Nev, you've been busy putting together a little something.
Yes, well, of course, normally by this time of the year, we would have gone to an air show, or we've done a listener meetup or something like that. And here we are at the end of April, having done none of that. And the next scheduled thing we've got in the diary probably is the Malta Air Show in September, at the end of September. I hope we're going to that, by the way, because I just can't face the prospects of not being there. But so what I thought I would do over the next few weeks, we're going to play out a bit of video of some of the things that we've been up to over the last 4 or 5 years. And it's a bit of fun, and there's a lot of sunshine as well, so that's nice to see.
So you join us then on our first day here at the Dubai International Air Show 2019.
Had a great time, Nev. It's been good to celebrate part of the 300th show.
I think the social aspect more than anything else. I mean, the whole thing was well done.
I thought it was wonderful. It was just great to see all of the people that I didn't know.
I found the whole thing, the way it's been organised, very, very impressive. John Hutchinson has had, by any measure, a wonderful flying career.
we are here at the Biggin Hill Festival of Flight, and it's safe to say I need these on because the weather is really good.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are at Duxford. Oh my goodness me, so many memories coming back from that.
That was really good, Nev. Well done.
Thanks. Also, of course, we saw John Hutchinson there, and it is the fine gentleman's birthday today as well. He's 83 years young, and him and his wife Sue are all well. I think we're a bit frustrated he can't get on one of his nice cruise ships that he does his talks on. But we sent John a video of us saying happy birthday to him. I got a nice reply this morning from him as well, which was great. So many happy returns indeed, John.
Definitely.
There's some nice memories there, Nev, I will say.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's plenty more where that came from. I'm going to have to keep churning these out every week, I think, just to sort of keep the motivation up.
Yeah,
because, so I've already finished the next one, which will play out next week, and I'll do a bit more work over the weekend, and we'll put some more together. But,
excellent.
It's some nice stuff that we did. Really pleased it went to some of those events.
Very much so. And don't forget, guys and girls, by the way, if you're listening to the audio version of this show, the video will be available at around about 10 a.m. when this is published on iTunes. Other podcast apps are available, of course. That highlights package will be available for you, and I'll make sure that there's a link to that directly in the show notes, because it's only a couple of minutes long, but the Duxford meet-up, every time I see video or footage from that, I've got so many good memories from that. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. So before we move on to the military section, obviously we're going to have a chat with Peter and Andy later on, so do start getting your questions in when we start doing that. But we've got a new little segment that we're going to do this week, Nev, haven't we?
Yes, an occasional segment, although I think there's so much material for this kind of thing, you never know how long it will go on for. But
good point.
You may have noticed that I get a bit irritated about some of the way that some of the media report these aviation stories occasionally, and just occasionally they get things wrong. I mean, who would have thought? So this is a segment that we're going to call, what are we calling it again? I've forgotten. That's not very good, is it? Yes, Groan of the Week.
Very much so. Okay, so with all of these things, there's loads of stories, isn't there? But really, we only have that's good, isn't it? When the technology doesn't work. That was supposed to have played something really exciting. But anyway, a drum roll, please, I think. So, Nev, could you perhaps announce who is this week's media fail?
Well, after considerable adjudication, which lasted about a minute and a half, I'm awarding it to the Daily Mail.
Oh, very good.
For running the story.
We can clap at this point.
Maybe not.
No, that was last night at 8 o'clock, Andy. You've been doing
that. Indeed. So give us some details then, Nev. What was it all about?
We'd love to show the picture of this as well.
Oh, okay.
So the first story, this is about the charter plane full of Romanian fruit pickers will land at Stansted tomorrow, it says. So that's all great. And it's going to be a Boeing 737 charter plane. So that's great as well. Everything's fine. So you scroll down, you see a nice picture of a person picking some fruit, and then you see a Boeing 737 MAX at an incredibly high angle of attack. So there's an irony there straight away, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely.
Looks like
How
he's
unfortunate.
just doing a bit of Farnborough display or something like
Let's
that,
hope
doesn't
so.
it? So it won't be that aircraft they'll be going on, will it? As it's as it's grounded. But it took them some time to recover when they then brought out the second version sometime later when they did concede it was actually an Airbus A320.
Oh, very good.
And they show a picture of said Airbus 320 further down in the story, landing at Stansted, which is one of Titan Airways' ones that they have. Bit of a fail there, lads. So well done them. Well done.
We'd love to make a sort of semi-regular feature of this, guys. So please, your eyes are all over the place, wonderful chat room, and our wonderful, wonderful listeners. Please do send in your media fails, or as we're going to call it, Nev's Groan of the Week. Please send them into podcast@planetalkinguk.com. That is podcast@planetalkinguk.com. Or why not send it to us on WhatsApp? Our WhatsApp number is +44 757 22 49166. That's +44 757 22 49166.
Jonathan Warner quite accurately says he thinks that the Daily Fail will win this one quite often.
Yes, I think he's probably right there. But it's always nice for them to, I'm sure there'll be other papers and newspapers they'll get a look in as well, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. There we go.
There we go. Yes.
So it's time for the military. So I think we should hand things over to Armando.
Yeah, guys. So we were going to skip it, but Jonathan Warner did join us a little bit later in the show. So I guess we must do it.
Especially, probably. Yeah.
So in that case, Matt, if you're ready to push the button, go ahead.
Go.
So this first story is in the few days since the Thunderbirds' unprecedented flyover to thank COVID-19 responders in southern Nevada, members of the world-famous flight demonstration team say they've been deeply moved by the reaction on social media. They also want the community to know that it took a massive team effort to work out the flight plan, allowing the Thunderbirds to fly over more than a dozen hospitals from North Las Vegas to Boulder City. Once we got to McCarran Airport, they brought everybody throughout the valley, said Colonel Kevin DeFalco, who is the Thunderbirds Director of Operations. North Las Vegas, Henderson, Boulder City, everyone really came together. It took a lot of dedicated planning, a lot of effort, a lot of coordination, and a lot of different agencies, local government as well, to support the effort. Lieutenant Colonel DeFalco says the team is also appreciative of the response that they've seen on social media, including the many pictures and videos of thousands of people on the ground as the F-16 formation flew over their heads. There were stories of backyards, neighbors cheering across the walls or fences, and that's what the city really needed at this time, bringing everyone together for a common cause to show their support for the community and our first responders, our frontline workers, medical workers, and all the central personnel who are keeping our city up and running. We've done lots of flyovers, said Captain Michael Brewer, who flies the Thunderbird No. 3 jet, but this one is very, very special given the circumstances. What's really heartwarming is that we are truly coming together as one team, one fight, both in the Air Force and in the civilian population, he added. Brewer said, to the best of his recollection, he can't think of another time when the Thunderbirds has ever done a flyover encompassing an entire city, much less a geographical area that large. During the flyover, Captain Brewer said he was focusing on his job, so he was unable to see anyone on the ground. But Lieutenant Colonel DeFalco said he was in the gray F-16 flanking the formation for safety reasons. I absolutely had the opportunity to look outside quite a few times, take a peek down towards the hospitals and facilities, and saw people out there with their arms in the sky. You can just tell that they were cheering and clapping and happy. In fact, I did see on the ground in Boulder City quite a few cars pulled up to the side with people standing out front, even a few flags waving. Both pilots also stressed how important it is for them, for everyone to realize that they're part of the community too, which is why they felt the need to find a way to thank everyone in the front lines battling the epidemic. Las Vegas is a special place to us. It is our home. It's where we live, where our children go to school, where our families are. It was incredible to show our support for the local community and tell them thank you, and allowing us to be part of this support network as we battle this pandemic. This is a small gesture that the Air Force can make, that the Thunderbirds can make for the city. Truly awesome, said Captain Brewer. What's really heartwarming is that we are truly coming together as one team, one fight, both in the Air Force and in the civilian population.
Now we've got a nice video here. What's that all about?
Yeah, so this is in-flight footage from the cockpit, and the Thunderbirds are always an av geek's dream to listen to in the way they communicate when they're flying. And this is pretty funny because I saw a meme on social media that they were not abiding to social distance rules by flying closer.
So close together, right?
Yeah. But
Okay.
just listen to this audio as the Thunderbirds fly over Las Vegas.
Thunderbird 1, ready for takeoff, right 3 left.
Roger, good for takeoff, 3 left. Wind, calm. Contact departure, good day.
Thunderbird 1, clear for takeoff, right 3 left. Thunderbirds, push 6. Yeah. We'll be taking off for the Las Vegas flyover. Las Vegas flyover, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Departure, Thunderbird 1's airborne, passing 3,500 for 5,000. Go, baby! Surrender! On the ready now.
So perhaps you could just explain a bit the images that we're seeing here, Armando, while they're not talking.
Yeah, so these guys, well, you can tell that they're not having any fun at all flying.
Yeah, right.
But they are flying in their arrowhead formation. Every time that there's, it's almost like marching if you were ever in the military, where there's a preparatory command and a command of execution. And as they go from formation to formation, they initiate their turns, they hit their turn points. There is one leader that is essentially preparing the formation, and then they execute all together. Like that, they're all on the same page. They know exactly what's coming in the seconds ahead. And it's just amazing from an aircrew discipline point of view, just the way they fly.
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, for us, obviously, it's like the red arrows is the thing for us, isn't it? And it's anything like this is just sort of mind-blowing, isn't it? The skills involved in such close formation and stuff. But it's some great...
I just say, I thought that the RT sounded like the ground control frequency at JFK.
I'd love to be able to talk like that at work.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that being allowed? Absolutely. So now it's not one to be outdone by us Brits. Obviously, there was a little bit of a military sort of fly past. If there's a little air, there was, believe it or not, an air show going on. Now the video was posted on Facebook back on the 10th of April by a chap by the name of Martin Bridge, and this was sent to me by one of my friends who works over at Look East here in the UK. And so, I mean, it's not quite to the level of the Thunderbirds here, but I think this is not a bad attempt actually. It's just posted by the RAF Collings spotters group as well. I think this is a nice touch. There's some attention to detail with models here as well. I think we've even got the smoke coming out of the back of the red arrows. They're busy doing a loop. Oh dear, we might have just seen the hand there on the model. But I love this. What a great way to kill some lockdown time, isn't it?
I gotta admit, it's a pretty amazing air show, and the sounds accompanying each of these aircraft is pretty accurate.
Absolutely, details are detail. We've even got some cockpit noise there. Yeah, it's just like
that's where Mum's something to do with my daughter in the garden this week. I think I've found it.
Yeah, absolutely. What have we got lined up on the runway here, Armando? You'll be able to identify this.
Oh, I think that's a tornado.
Is it?
Yeah, it looks like a tornado. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It seems to have stalled on the way, but anyway, you get the. I mean, as I say, far be it from for us Brits to be outdone by the Thunderbirds. I mean, we can't possibly allow that, can we? So there we go. Anyway,
well, there's a couple of people in the chat room that are saying that they prepared the red arrows. I will never take sides as to which of these demonstration teams is the best one because they're all very unique. And I always said, even though I was partial to the Thunderbirds, I love the Red Arrows show. I think the Red Arrows just do a little bit different kind of show, and there's some maneuvers that only they do, which are pretty impressive.
Oh, and of course, what was nice the summer. Do you remember last summer when we were allowed outside, and because they did a tour of the States, didn't they? And it was one of those rare occasions where at some air shows you got to see both the Thunderbirds and the Red Arrows, which was great, wasn't it?
Actually, controversial in the chat room. Laura Davis, she prefers the Blue Angels, but the Thunderbirds are fun.
Ah, the Blue Angels. Now, what are the Blue Angels? What's that? Explain.
That the Blue Angels is the U.S. Navy demonstration team.
Right. Okay.
So they're flying the F-18s, and they've just, I believe, this year have upgraded to the Super Hornet. So they're going to have a great show for 2021, I imagine.
Wow. Okay. Owen's saying in the chat room that he thinks that the blue show off their aircraft so well. What a wonderful display they do as well. So yes, I think it's right that we're name checking the them as well. Saw them in Toronto. Oh yes, that's right. It was Stephen Ivy, Dr. Steph, and Auntie Liz, wasn't it? They got together, I think, and saw them in Toronto, which was nice. But the Red Arrows are great when the Brits allow them to perform. Of course, that was the most embarrassing thing about Farnborough, wasn't it? When the Americans all came over for it, and we were like, "Yes, you're going to love the Red Arrows. They're amazing. They'll knock spots off." And then all they were allowed to do was basically a glorified fly past, which ruined it a bit. But anyway, there we are. On to Carlos. The next military story is with you.
This one, yes, this is on the aviationist.com. And this particular aircraft, this story goes on about, I swear this is a DC-3 in disguise. Anyway, this US and Russian media depict starkly different narratives of Russian Navy IL-38N intercept by Alaskan F-22s. As reported in the international media, US Air Force F-22 Raptors, supported by KC-135's Stratotankers and E-3 AWACS aircraft, responded to a pair of Russian military Ilyushin IL-38Ns, anti-submarine warfare and maritime patrol aircraft off the Alaskan coast in international airspace on Wednesday, April the 8th. But the differences in how the story is being reported around the world is interesting to study, and how journalism may influence our interpretation of events depending on where we live. The Russian Navy IL-38 Dolphins, NATO's reporting name, were escorted and monitored on Wednesday during routine North American Air Defense Command NORAD surveillance of the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone, and were met by the US Air Force F-22s over the Bering Sea north of Alaska's remote Aleutian Islands. As unusual, the Russian IL-38s never entered US or Canadian airspace and were flying within international regulations for planned military training exercises. To the credit of NORAD and the public affairs team who spoke to the Aviationist on Friday last week, the official USAF NORAD account of the story is journalistically balanced. Unfortunately, the US military sources could not provide photos from the flight of the F-22s with the Russian IL-38s because of a time of day issue, according to official sources, the aviationist.com said. Japanese self-defense forces provide one photo of the Russian IL-38s since the sun had come up by the time the aircraft were near Japan. The Russians issued a statement saying the IL-38 aircraft activity was part of a planned training exercise by Russian forces that began in the region on March the 30th. Russian state sponsors TASS, or TASS news outlet, reported that Tu-142 and IL-38 anti-submarine warfare aircraft were operating from the aerodromes in the Primorye region and the Kamchatka. Mouthful there after a few beers. The report went on to say... Kamchatka, thank you for that, Armando. The report went on to say that the Russian Pacific Fleet kicked off a series of tactical drills in the distant maritime zone in the Far East involving over 20 naval aviation aircraft and helicopters. Reports about the exercise were from the official Russian fleet media releases. At some points, the that K word that Armando's good at saying, region of Russia lies approximately 1,000 miles from Alaska's Aleutian Island arc in the northern Pacific. The neutral Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone mostly extends 200 miles off the US-Alaskan coast. Aircraft from any country entering the International Identification Zone are required to radio their planned destination and course to air traffic control authorities in that region. Aircraft are also required to use radar transponder in the AADIZ that constantly transmits their identification, speed, course, altitude to air traffic controllers to both civil and military. The story does go on quite a fair amount on this one, but it's they're always conducting these exercises, as we know here in the across the UK here, because obviously we scramble our quick response or QFA quick response aircraft here from Lossiemouth here in the UK.
Yeah, that's right, Carlos. And that just goes to show that while the rest of the world is kind of taking a pause, these military chess games and political chess games continue. And all over the world, there are aircraft flying and operations as normal. I just saw another video or some pictures from the Pacific where there was some aircraft participating in an elephant walk. So I think there were B-1s or B-52s along with some fighter jets. And this was just a day or two ago. So the military posturing continues, even though the rest of the world is taking a bit of a pause.
Is it just me, Armando, or does that honestly not look like a C-47 or a DC-3?
I think it definitely looks like a P-3 ski.
Okay.
An upside down C-130 with a Russian star on the side.
Yeah.
Oh, well, they said it was an optical illusion.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure all these pictures are taken by iPhones, and I love how everything is just posted on Twitter now. That's the intelligence source of choice.
In fact, you can always rely on Uncle Micah here with a bit of a... He said, remember, let's not forget that Captain Nick used to intercept Russian bear bombers in his F4 back in the day. So, I mean, these chess games, if you like, have been going on for years and years and probably will continue to do so for centuries, won't they?
Oh, most certainly. Most certainly.
So, Nev, you've got the next story on Big One joining the fight against COVID.
That's what she said.
Yes. Well... Of course, the COVID-19 thing, there's been some extraordinary logistics and cargo operations, but this one is incredible, I think. This is on the popularmechanics.com website, and it says that the world's largest cargo aircraft full of medical supplies to combat the COVID-19 pandemic touched down in Warsaw on Tuesday. The aircraft lifted off the day before from China, carrying personal protective equipment, including masks and medical testing equipment. The lift was reportedly the largest cargo shipment by air by volume, filling 4/5 of the massive aircraft's cavernous hold. The American Journal of Transportation reports that the aircraft departed from the China airport on April the 13th, stopping in Almaty airport in Kazakhstan for refueling and to allow the crew to rest. The aircraft was loaded with about 100 tons of medicines, tests for laboratory analysis, medical masks, and other protective equipment, with a total load of about 1,000 cubic meters. In the history of aviation, this cargo volume has never been transported inside the cargo hold of an aircraft. According to Antonov Airlines, the operator of the AN225, the big jet has an internal cargo volume of 1,200 cubic meters, or 42,377 cubic feet. The AN225 is also capable of lifting a maximum of 551,155 pounds, or 275 tons. Poland's order of medical supplies from China weighs a total of 200 tons, but it is light enough. It occupies significant volume, so the shipment is being split into two AN225 flights of 100 tons each. So,
Wow.
incredible.
Can I just say, we were talking a minute ago guys, sorry, Nev, about the maintenance stuff. This that says on the story that you're reading, Nev, that this jet has come fresh from an 18-month overhaul.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right.
Months.
So I think we did a story on that just a few weeks ago, where in October of 2018, this one aircraft went into an upgrade program and just came out in March. So it's only been back in the air in the past few weeks, and it's already being put to use, which is great to see.
There's a small point of order from the chat room, by the way, from Laura Davis. A slight complaint here. She said we said that word. We said the COVID-19 and nobody took a drink.
Sorry.
I know. Come on.
Oh, sorry.
Come along.
Cheers.
See, this is what we love about the chat room. Obviously, they're always keeping us on our toes. You see, that's fantastic. Thank you, Laura, for highlighting our slight slip up there. Fantastic.
So story number 4 this week. A very, very poignant story.
Yeah, and also Armando, I noticed you very kindly posted this on our Facebook feed, didn't you? Actually, a great story here.
Yeah, guys, this week does mark the 50th anniversary of Apollo 13. If you remember, it was a lunar mission which NASA later regarded as, quote, a successful failure. Although Apollo 13's crew did not or could not complete their original mission of landing on the moon, there was an explosion. They said they had to go watch the movie. Go watch the movie because it's great. It's a Tom Hanks movie. Pretty much gives you the whole story. But the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum is doing a special series. They've done some live talks, some live chats, and even more special is they've posted a 40th anniversary Apollo 13 video from 2010, which features flight director Gene Kranz. If you guys remember in the movie, he was famous for wearing his white leather vest, and he wore that for numerous missions. But it has Jim Lovell, Fred Hayes, Ken Mattingly, and it's introduced by John Glenn. So we'll post the link in the PTUK Facebook, as well as the show notes. Go watch. It's an hour and a half long. It's an amazing speech by this crew in just a very unguarded way and pretty humorous in the way that they describe the events of that entire mission. So go check it out over on YouTube.
If you want to go full geek, and I mean real geek, on YouTube, there are the entire recordings of the flight director's loop of the incident.
Oh, wow.
With everybody else getting involved, and it's just a massive noise. And Gene Kranz somehow manages, I have no idea how, to listen to everybody and work everything out. It's just a masterclass, or masterclass, depending where you're from, in failure management. It is beautiful. And there are a good 3-4 hours of it on there.
Oh, wow.
It's brilliant. I mean, I love everything to do with Apollo. I use the font Futura. If anybody wants to use it, that's the font that's used in all documentation. It's fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, Mike has gone so far as to say in the chat room here that Apollo 13 movie was almost 98% accurate. Chris Griggs has quite rightly pointed out, don't tell APG because that's a little bit over their 50% that they like to go for. So, yes, quite. It's as anything to do with stuff like this. I mean, the whole flying in general. Don't get me started on helicopters, obviously, but yeah.
I was quite a young fellow when this all happened, of course, and I remember being absolutely glued to the television. I mean, everybody was wishing the crew, hoping they were going to come back safely, but it really was touch and go for quite a while. And my goodness, everybody was so relieved.
Very
Mike has just made a great point there. There's the podcast 30 Minutes to the Moon. It's a series, and if you listen to it, it explains it all brilliantly, how they did everything.
That's right. So that'll be on the BBC Sounds app. It's the BBC. So it's called 13 Minutes to the Moon. If it's on BBC Sounds, it's also likely, I guess, in the States to be available via iTunes, because I know they publish a lot of their stuff on there as well. But yeah.
And I won't go on about it anymore, but there's another one on Netflix about Apollo 11 that just came out recently. Full high-def video footage of it all, and lots of bits and pieces that I've never really seen before. It's great.
Laura Davis, actually, last point we'll sound. Laura Davis as well said there's a whole website out about it with the mission, with the full mission transcripts, pics, videos, and all the loops. It's Apollo in real time. And Dr. Steph saying that there's also a Twitter account that tweets the events in real time that it actually happened in. So there are lots of geekery there in this very boring time, let's be honest.
So as everyone will know, we've got two very special guests on the show this week. And we've got Andy and Peter, both from two very different parts of the aviation industry. Andy being a captain on the Airbus A320, and Peter being a guy who looks after all the engines and bits and pieces and does the inspections. So, Andy, we'll have a chat with you first. Andy, obviously, we haven't had you on the show for a while. How's life been treating you?
Yeah. In fact, since the last time I was on the show, I've moved house 3 times.
Wow. Okay.
Did you say 3?
Three times, yeah. But this is the forever home now, back in the northeast where I belong.
It's the only place that they'll have you, mate. That's what it is.
That's it. Yeah, so just ticking along at the airline. I've moved base now. I'm up in Manchester, which is lovely. It's closer to home, but not quite home, because home is the northeast. I'm up in Durham. Yeah, and I mean, you had Matt on the other week. He was telling you about everything that we've been doing with the podcast and the lounge, and we keep adding more stuff to that as well. So yeah, everything's great, and I'm absolutely loving lockdown.
It gives, obviously, as we know, some of us love to dabble with the flight sims and stuff. I'm guessing that we spoke to Matt last week in regards to I think he was on the verge of a possible divorce if he had purchased X-Plane 11, as much as I tried to persuade him to buy it. But is that something you sort of play with at home? Have you got a flight sim at home or anything you...
That's where I started flight sim, really. All the way back to FS 95.
Oh, funny.
And now I'm running at the moment. I mean, I haven't touched it in a long time. I've got P3D. I'm not an X-Plane kind of guy. I like the Mad Dog on there, which is quite good to fly. But yeah, I haven't touched Flight Simulator in a long time, because the last thing I really want to do after spending 5 days flying an aircraft is to come home and sit in front of a computer. And that would probably result in a divorce.
Right, yes, good point, yes. That's a good point.
So obviously you're flying the 320 for the airline that you fly for here in the UK. Is it just a 320? Are you flying 319s as well?
19s, yeah, while we've still got them. I think this whole crisis will hasten their removal from the airline. And we've got 21s as well.
And you're flying a 21 as well?
Haven't had the chance yet, because we don't have any in Manchester, but some were due to come this summer, but we'll just have to wait and see now what happens.
Excellent. So, any questions from Peter? You got any questions for you, Peter, to Andy?
Well, are you looking forward to the new version of Flight Simulator? That's it. I know you said you're not. I know that you said you're not got a lot of time and you kind of don't want to do it when you get home. But you've seen there's a new one coming out.
I have, yes. And in the past, I was heavily involved. I mean, again, this is getting geeky. There's an aircraft, the FS Labs A320 for Flight Simulator. I was heavily involved in that. But the new one looks really good. I just don't understand how it works, being streamed online and all that sort of stuff. My technical level with computers goes so far. I mean, ask Matt, who I do the podcast with. Quite often I'm texting him going, I don't know how to do this on the computer. Can you tell me?
It's all right for us, though. You see, we have easy access to a Nev. He's very good at stuff like that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Peter, actually, we're starting to get some questions in from the chat room for you here. So this one's from Tony. Yes, he's saying, question for Peter. We know modern jet engines are more efficient, but with numerous high-profile engine failures, do you think modern jets are less reliable than their predecessors?
It's a good question, Tony. Yeah. So, I mean, you look at things like CFM 56, V2500, and they kind of carry on quite nicely. Airbus 737 and so on. And then you look at some of the Trents and you think, for a company like Rolls-Royce, who I used to work with and my grandparents World War II. They were typists in the office when the Lancaster bomber came in Derby, where I'm from. And you think, well, what's going on? You know, you've got the LEAP engine, the rotor bow issue on startup, and all sorts of little bits and pieces here, there, and everywhere. I think what's happening is that people are trying to push things forward really quickly. If you look at anything, you look at the last 100 years compared to the last 300 or 400 years, and the rate of increase in technology and engineering increases massively. And I think there's a risk that things can go a little bit too fast. But at the same time, there are some advances. They're trying to make things lighter and stronger and, of course, more efficient, I think. So I think if I was to sum it up, I'd say let's not reinvent the wheel, guys. Let's look at the things that do work, keep using them. Reliability. The turbine engines are possibly one of the most reliable engines. They're just used. They don't get much wear, really, unlike a traditional piston engine. So, but the level of safety, the level of checks that are done by everybody, pilots, engineers, and everything, you're in good hands, really. So that's what I will say.
Actually, we've got another question from Tony here. We'll stick with him if we may. So he's saying, do you find that the higher mounted engines on the T-tails suffer less wear or damage?
I think in terms of ingesting FOD from the ground, so for example, gravel, stones, when you apply power, most runways and aprons are pretty clear, but you only need to get to a certain airport and get too close. It's not even a case of getting too close as the wind picks up, sandy environments. I suppose there's an argument that the higher mounted engines get less, ingest less, but as part and parcel of my job, most engines I see are on wing rather than on tail. There's a handful business jets and things, and nothing really massively noticeable in terms of the differences with FOD ingestion and so on. And I think that's credit to airport authorities keeping the places fairly clear. But I would say there's a good argument, certainly if you're landing on slightly rough runway where there is loose material, as let's say you're doing some kind of extra terrain flight. They're testing smaller jets at the moment to see if they can land them on wet grass at the moment. This is one of the things they're trying to do, and they really put them through the paces. And mud and water goes down the engines. A friend of mine is involved with that locally. He actually is an agricultural worker, but he sprays the runways, the grass, to get it waterlogged. And that's an interesting job. So, yeah, I think you could probably argue there's a bit less, but you need to remember that the power, I'm sure you appreciate the power from these jets, the intakes. Take a 757. If you're stood near where the nose wheel is or in front of the nose when full power's applied, you're going down that engine. There's no two ways about it. So the height, it is a factor, but basically anything close to those, out of those safety zones is going to go down the engine, unfortunately.
When you're doing those borescopic inspections on the engines, Peter, with the little cameras, how long is it? What's the general time it takes to do, like say a CFM 56?
So it depends on the sort of check you're doing. If you're doing, for example, what we call a hot section, which is a very typical check that you might do on a regular basis, either because it's something that has to be done or because there is a known defect that has a repeat inspection cycle on it, which could be hours or cycles of that engine. And so a hot section inspection, 2 to 3 hours maybe, depending. A full engine inspection really depends on the size of the engine, because remember, you're looking at every single blade in that engine, so you could be looking at 2,000 to 4,000 blades maybe. And so CFM 56 is best part of a day, really. It depends how you do it, and it really is fundamentally down to how well the aircraft is prepared before you get there, before we arrive to do the job, and what sort of setup you've got. If you have to do it outside, I've had to do it outside in whichever storm it was. The last one, I was outside doing a borescope inspection, and you have to be very careful, because if it gets too windy, you can't carry on. So hot sections, 2 to 3 hours. You have to video record the whole inspection. It's a requirement. And a full engine inspection, a big CF6 engine, very tricky to inspect because the ports are all over the place, is going to be a day or more. to do a full engine inspection. And then, of course, you find something, you find a defect that's got to be measured. You have to consult the maintenance manual. You have to make a decision. Can this fly or not? What sort of repeats is going to be required? Do I need to contact the manufacturer? And that cascade effect means it takes much more time, and that can have a knock-on effect to the airline and the logistics and the planning. So, yeah.
Nev, and over that cross there in Buckinghamshire, any questions from you for Peter?
Yeah, I was going to ask him actually, Peter, how with you were talking about the Trent 1000s and all the rest of it. Obviously, it's all about fuel saving now, isn't it? It's all about efficiency of the engine. We were talking about reliability, but actually, of course, these are into incredible numbers of ETOPS. You hear about 270 minutes ETOPS and longer. What are you involved with those ETOPS inspections of the aircraft, of the engines when they're on the aircraft as well?
Sometimes, if I'm honest, most of the work that I have been doing has been short to medium haul jets. Well, the shortest haul sort of A319, 320, 73. There are, again, there's this whole swathe of different checks that you have to do for ETOPS, and do you need an APU or not? If you're going ETOPS, you're going to probably need to have that APU. And of course, ferry flights, if there's a known issue, you can get special permission to take an aircraft outside and around to get it to where it needs to go to have the work done. But I'm not really greatly involved with the ETOPS side of things.
Do you inspect the APU as well? Is that part of your job?
It's just another jet engine. And although it's less frequent, typically we'll get a request for both engines on twin engine and the APU as well. So
I'm going to allow myself just a supplementary question.
Yeah, sure.
As they say in the 5 o'clock briefings. Why is it that APUs seem to have a built-in unreliability? I don't know how many aircraft I've been on. They've had to do a cross-bleed start because the APUs failed. It seems to be quite a lot. I don't know whether it's just me or whether that is the case.
Well, I think that the other chaps will probably know. I mean, they do a lot of hours. When you look at APU maintenance manuals, some of them will give you limits that you can allow. For example, a crack in a blade, you're allowed a certain number of 0.0045 inches or something. Others simply say, if you find damage, remove it and get a new one. But my suggestion would be that they're often started up and they're run for long periods of time, shut down, started up again, shut down, and it tends to be quite a quick turnout. That's my theory anyway.
Yeah, so blaming the flight crew, I think that's...
No.
We don't look after them. That is the base of it. We do not look after them. When we shut them down, on a 40-minute turnaround and then start them up again. That's not healthy. It doesn't have the required coolant time to allow the temperatures to dissipate. So that really messes them up. And then as well, people don't shut them down properly, especially on the 320. If you shut them down, then just turn the batteries off, it leaves the inlet flap open, and that's not good for them, which I'm sure Peter's seen many times before.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions for you, Peter.
Yeah, please.
Have you worked on the LEAP engine?
No, I haven't actually. I've got a number of colleagues who do, but I haven't specifically worked. I know of it, but I haven't worked on it myself.
For the fan blades, what sort of different checks would you have to do, because they are horrible composite things?
It's a blisk. It's out of my area of expertise really, because of this blisk. If anybody listening, it's a sort of continual piece of engineering creativity, probably worth upwards of $250,000, and the rest, just for that one element. Generally, fan blades are inspected as part of some of the, I don't know if it's C checks or whatever, but they will take them out and have a really good look on all of the aircraft. But with the blisk, of course, it's unique. And this is all new stuff. In terms of boroscoping, it's all brand new stuff. It's a pretty much brand new engine. And a lot of people are getting issues where they have to, for example, do a 360-degree check of a particular area of that engine. Because normally you put the boroscope in and you turn the engine around and see the blades. So this is more the internal side. But there are issues where people are looking at the maintenance manual and saying, we're going to get stuck in the engine if we go down there. So it's all quite new stuff, and the maintenance manual is being changed as we go. But the Blisk, I mean, there's certainly a very detailed visual inspection, and you'll be getting a non-destructive testing taking place. There's all sorts of technologies using sound and X-ray that they can look through the blades, and that is a very advanced area, definitely eddy currents and so on. So, yeah.
And what sort of materials are they using in the core of the engine? Because when we start the things up, a CFM 56, bang, straight away, no matter what temperature it is, it fires up. Whereas we've got to wait for the core to, it just says in the book, stabilize. It can take anywhere between 30 seconds to a minute and a half before we get light up. What sort of reason is that?
I think it started when, I don't know if it was that or another CFM, when they initially, might have been the V2500 actually, when they initially released it, it was taking 7 minutes. But basically what it is rotor bow. They had this issue with unequal cooling. So it has to go through this process of basically what you would call dry motoring, air being pushed through. And it's purely and simply just to equalize the temperature. It's a FADEC is sitting there kind of going, yeah, I think we're about ready. Yeah, we're good. Fuel goes in, ignition comes on. There you go. So really it's just a stabilization thing, and it's rotor bow.
So is that an automatic version of what they had to do on Concorde to debore the engine?
I suppose so. Not familiar with that, but possibly. I don't know. It's done controlled by FADEC. So and these things change over time. You know, they have to get things just right. But don't know about that one. I wasn't aware. Bore the engine.
Yeah, I remember seeing the crews on Concorde actually holding the start sequence at a lower N1 before they would allow it to fully rotate.
Yeah, and I'm sure the Airbus or Aerospatial called it deboring the engine.
Yeah,
yeah, very good, very interesting.
When you're doing the inspections, Peter, on the engines, if you find a blade, a compressor blade or whatever that is faulty or cracked, what are the implications in respect to kind of time and cost? Is it an engine off, or can that be done in situ?
So, first of all, the maintenance manual is written very carefully by the manufacturers, because they know certain issues, certain defects can be left for a certain amount of time before a certain action has to be taken. So this is all pre-planned. You have very clear instructions in the maintenance manual as to what course of action to take. So, for example, take a radial tip crack on a high-pressure compressor blade. So it would need to be measured. You would measure it. You'd work out which part of the blade is cracked, which area of the blade is cracked, which section it is. You'd measure the crack and its location, its direction. Is it an axial crack? Is it a radial crack? And you then consult the maintenance manual, and you decide what limits that is in. Some defects you tend to see a lot of, and they're quite acceptable. Other defects, for example, look at the low pressure turbine. You know, why is that important? Well, it turns the fan. What does the fan do? It produces 80% of the thrust. It's critically important. You see the tiniest little defect on that, and typically you're taking that engine off. If you take the engine off, you're going to be looking at least £1 million to sort that out. You can, there are some repairs that can be done. It says in the maintenance manual, some conditions can be repaired using a thing called a borrow blender. And what that is a boroscope kit, which has, if you imagine a dental drill, and you go in, and with this very fine dental drill, you blend away the crack. So if you imagine you have a blade and it's got a crack in it here, small crack, what you would do is create a curve with that on the front of that blade. And it has to, they're again at maintenance manual limits, and then that condition is said to be repaired. But anything else apart from that, you know, you can't remove blades. The engine has to come off. And a lot of airlines and lease companies have spare engines, so they swap them over. And that one has to go off to the workshop for an overhaul.
Peter, along those lines, kind of a follow-up question to that.
Yes.
Is when we were at Oshkosh this year, we interviewed Tammy Jo Schultz, who was on Southwest 1380, and that NTSB report said that the ultimate cause was a failed fan blade. Now, EASA was actually the first one to issue an emergency airworthiness directive. Now, you said sometimes it's over £1 million to take an engine off or something to do those inspections. What about when there is an emergency airworthiness directive like that as a result of a report? How did the airlines tackle that?
Well, they simply have to do it. They have to, from a sort of management logistics dispatch level, they have to get their fleet, because you can imagine, I'm sure you do appreciate, that these aircraft have to be sort of ferried around the place. They'll do this sector, then they go in for their maintenance. And the work has to be done. So if there's an urgent service bulletin, airworthiness directive, whatever it is, and I've seen them before, then, so for example, V2500, there's a flange on the outside of the inner core of the engine, the outside of the case, where somebody recently discovered a crack. And therefore, it's actually one of the easiest inspections to do, because you're looking at the outside of the engine. But you've got to boroscope it because you want a very close image. But that simply has to be factored in. The airlines get advance notice. They're obviously subscribers to all of the necessary maintenance manuals and manufacturers' information. And then they've just got to work it in. They've got a time frame, and it's basically, it's tough. They've got to work it in, and they've got to get those aircraft, or the engines taken off at least and swapped round, and get that work done. So it's a non-negotiable, really. So yeah, it's a good question, that one.
Thanks.
Yeah.
What the training involved, Peter, to get to where you are now? Is it quite intense, actually? Is there like a training course?
Yeah, well, you basically, obviously, people come from different backgrounds. Engineers tend to do a lot of different things, and it's a competency. A lot of people in engineering pick up specific competencies, things that they do. There's also type ratings, the same as with the pilots, type ratings on the aircraft. And it takes quite a long time. The key thing really is there are various courses that are run by various organisations, Part 145, Part 147. One of them comes under maintenance, one under training. But in essence, what you do for every single engine that you look at, you have to do competency training on that engine, how to boroscope that engine specifically. You have the fundamentals of how to do it, but you don't just go to courses. You actually have to then be under an organisation where people more experienced than yourself are showing you how to boroscope and going through the technique. And you're obviously monitored like any other profession. You're monitored until you get to a stage where you can be allowed to do tasks yourself, and then eventually you are given an approval and you go out and you inspect yourself. Anybody can do it with a determination. Planes are going to keep flying, and we need people out there engineering and doing all sorts of things really to do with the aircraft, but boroscoping particularly. Great job, because you get to travel around a lot and see a lot of different aircraft up close, and it's good fun.
Anyone else got any questions for Peter?
Well, that's
stunned silence.
Yeah, stunned silence. Absolutely. There's a lot of data, and I mean, I'll be brutally honest, guys. I've sat here through most of that conversation and thinking, nope, don't understand a word. Honestly, it's unfortunately we are at that point where we need to sort of start.
Matt, we better not leave Owen out, because Owen did ask in the chat room.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, Owen asked, why did the APUs fail in the worst parts of the world, i.e. Moscow in the winter and Dubai in the summer?
It's a bloke called Murphy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some bloke called Murphy.
Yeah.
We've got. I'm trying to see, because I think there are some more questions in the show notes here, but it's disappeared.
So to brief or wrap, or to sort of wrap the whole thing up, Peter, anyone who wants to get into your area of work, what's the best sort of way to get into it as such?
I think go to the aviation events and get talking to the companies that are doing scholarships, apprenticeships and so on. Get talking to people, get connecting with people. Obviously, for people who are, for example, in school or college, just getting a good set of qualifications, look at getting work experience if possible, wherever is your local airport. Get it done as early as you can, because security obviously is an issue getting clearances. But most places are very eager to take on apprentices. I did an apprenticeship at Rolls-Royce Aerospace back in the 1990s. And that's the way to go, certainly for the younger individuals, because it's suited to school stage people. But, people changing careers is a similar thing. You know, looking at training options, but go to the aviation events and start talking to the airlines and the maintenance organisations.
So what's the future, sort of last up then, Peter, what's kind of the future plans for you? You're going to stick within the industry?
Obviously, I'm remaining hopeful, remaining positive. We're still going to need aircraft flying, and my suspicion is that as well as the simulators for the engine ground runs and, of course, you chaps flying the aircraft, going to be absolutely chock-a-blocker when we finally get released. But there's also going to be a lot of boroscope inspections coming up, a lot of work. Just remaining positive, remaining hopeful, obviously looking forward to the future, and so on. And blue skies, I suppose.
That's true. That's a very good line. Just one final question, Tony. I managed to find the one that I was looking for. Tony was asking, can the used fan blades be swapped individually between engines, or do they need to be new ones?
I don't actually know the answer to that. Basically, all of these, particularly the fan blades, very critical in terms. The thing is, with the boroscoping, we don't tend to. Actually, that's the one part that we don't really look at that often. That's dealt with by the maintenance organisation. We tend to look at the rest of the engine. Fan blade, but certainly other blades. You do see people. Engines are broken down and sold on second hand and then have work done to them. But generally speaking, people fit new blades to things. Or, there's only so far you can go on a blade. It's had a blend repair. It's had this, that, the other. And you want to be replacing with new parts. But I don't think there's much of a... I think they tend to end up on people's key rings most of the time. It's not a big fan blade, it'd be quite heavy, is it?
Sections thereof, yeah, absolutely. Well, Peter, thank you very much for your time. Andy, thank you very much for your help as well, and some great questions there between you guys, so thank you very much for that.
Absolute pleasure.
Unfortunately, we've got to start wrapping up, because otherwise we're going to be reaching APG lengths territory-wise, so we need to sort of start moving on. One thing I would just like to say that we just had a message from Uncle Micah, and many of you will be familiar with the fabulous podcast that is the Airplane Geeks, and I'll just read you the message that Micah said. He said, if you could mention this at the end of the show, I'd be very grateful. The Airplane Geeks is going to be recording a very special 600th episode on Monday night. It's going to be done via Zoom with audience participation, and if people want to participate, all they have to do is write to geeks@airplanegeeks.com. That is geeks@airplanegeeks.com to get the required code. It'll be recorded at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, who's very good at translating that? What will 8 p.m. Eastern Time be here in the UK? Armando's probably the fastest at answering that one.
Oh, what are we?
5 in the after? It'll be 2 o'clock in. No, 1 o'clock in the morning.
1 o'clock, yeah.
1 o'clock in the morning. Right, okay, that's, yes. So, mind you, many can't sleep at the moment, what with what's going on. So this will be a perfect way of keeping...
Number one, what else do you have to do? Number two, 53% of our listenership for PTUK is actually in the US. So
good point. Good point, well made. Okay, yes, that is very, very good. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can do by using our social media links. Search for your chosen social media channel by looking for Plane Talking UK. If you take yourself to the Facebook page, actually, you will notice that a very interesting little video has just been uploaded by the legend that is Nev. So make sure you take yourself to the Facebook page, especially because the montage video that we were talking about earlier is there. WhatsApp number, +44 757 22 49166. That's +44 757 22 49166. I recommend sending messages about 3 o'clock in the morning, because that usually wakes up Carlos, so it's a lot of fun. And the email address for the podcast is podcast@planetalkinguk.com. The website, www.planetalkinguk.com. Don't forget, you can buy yourself a nice t-shirt on there. But also, if you use the links that are on the front there, we've got links for Patreon if you'd like to help us keep the show on the air. The Amazon link, if you do your shopping using that link, then Amazon pay us a small small referral fee for your purchases, basically, so you can donate to the show without actually having to do to put your hand in your pocket, as it were. And also PayPal, there's a link on there for as well. I know a lot of people prefer to use that channel as a way of donating. Obviously, we completely understand these are ridiculous times that we all find ourselves in.
True.
And I would like to, well, I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of everyone when I say our wonderful Patreons have been very loyal throughout all of this, and I think it's a little round of applause for everyone who's helping us to keep.
Thanks, guys and girls.
Yeah, it's as I say, in these difficult times, it is very much appreciated. So there we are, Carlos. I'll leave you to wrap up.
So that is where we're going to bring episode number 314 to a close.
Carlos, sorry to interrupt.
Yes. What's up?
Did you realise that this is officially your 300th appearance on the show?
Yay! Actually, just on that note of episode numbers, when you just said earlier about the about Airplane Geeks having their 600th show, I've been listening to the Airplane Geeks since episode 1.
Oh, wow, okay.
I've listened to 600 episodes soon.
Fantastic. That is
fantastic.
Yeah.
That is
so
dedication,
congratulations on your 300th show, mate. Well done, you.
Thanks.
Well done. Very well done.
Couldn't do it without all you lot, I tell you. Oh, no.
Well, none of us were here when you started all those
That's true,
shows.
yeah.
Yeah,
how'd that happen?
The scariest thing is our producer, I don't think, was actually born when you first started this. But anyway, there we go. That's
true.
That's another story.
So we're going to say a big thanks to all the chat room who've joined us tonight, everyone who's joined us in the live YouTube chat room. Don't forget to say thanks to all the people who listen to the show as an audio podcast as well. Thanks to all of you as well. A big thanks to Andy from the A320 podcast for joining us tonight. Excellent to see you, and hope you have a fun homeschooling times at home.
We won't leave it so long next time, Andy. We won't leave it so long next time.
Brilliant. I'm free a lot.
Yes, there's a lot of people like that at the moment.
And a big thanks as well to Peter for joining us as well. Absolutely fantastic to hear from you as well, Peter. So thanks.
I hope we can persuade you to join us perhaps on a sort of forthcoming show. It'd be great to have you on again.
I'd love to. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Pleasure is all ours, mate.
Excellent.
Really, yeah.
So from me, Carlos, here in my home PTUK studios, from Matt across in the main PTUK studios, from Nev in the Nev Tech studios, from Armando over across the pond in the Armando studios, and from our two guests, have a great weekend. Stay safe, everyone. Stay healthy. Take care. And see you next week.
See you all next week. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.